pages between them, which is usually just one or two per group. And then it
I agree 100.
but highlighting this, there is a way to do it. Oh yeah, you just do it. You just do that. So all you do is you flag it. There you go. Yeah, you do the flag. Yeah, and you see if you do that.
One minute. Good evening. I'd like to call to order this December 4th, 2018 work session of the Kingman Common Council. Tonight in our work session, all items listed are for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. The primary purpose of the work session meetings is to provide for the City Council the opportunity for in-depth discussion and study of specific subjects. Public comment is not provided for on the agenda and may be made only on approved by consensus of the council. In appropriate circumstances, a brief presentation may be permitted by a member of the public or another interested party on an agenda item if invited by the mayor or city manager to do so. The mayor may limit or end the time for such presentations. In the first order of business tonight in the work session is a special presentation by Mayor Jen Miles. And this presentation is to honor those that are leaving the council tonight and have provided service to this city as both the mayor and city council members. Taking on this role requires such dedication and giving the time and energy to study the issues and make the decisions for policies and fiscal outcomes, and all of the things that the council addresses takes a great deal of dedication and love of the city. So we really want to make sure that these people are recognized and presented with plaques that recognize their service to the city. And I think the first, do we have the plaques? Okay, the first plaque would be given to Mayor Gates if she is still here. And I don't see her, so we will make sure that she gets the plaque. And then Councilwoman Vicki Kress, is she in the audience? I don't see her either, so I'm going to say we get the plaque to her. And Councilman Stuart Yoakum is in the audience, so we will present him with his plaque. Second order of business is a presentation by the League of Arizona Cities and Towns, and I believe we have Mr. Ponder, Nick Ponder, and Tom Belshey here this evening.
Correct. As asked for several meetings ago by the council, we have invited the League to come and make a presentation on kind of what they do for the city and the importance of our partnership. So we'd be happy to hear from them at this time.
Thank you.
Mayor Miles and members of the committee or the council, we're very happy to be here tonight. My name is Tom Belshey. I'm the Deputy Director of the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. This is Nick Ponder. He is our Legislative Director. Nick is going to start off the presentation tonight, but I wanted to make a few comments and just talk about what municipal leagues do a little bit in general, and then we'll get into specifics of what cities and towns do, or what the league does on behalf of cities and towns. Municipal leagues have been formed in every state except Hawaii, and the reason that they are formed is to do those things for cities and towns that would cost them a lot to do on their own, but are in common with all cities and towns. And so they're in very specific areas of things like legislative advocacy, publication, education, training, and we're going to talk about all of those things individually tonight. So. I'll turn it over to Nick.
All right. Good evening. As Tom said, my name is Nick Ponder. I'm the Legislative Director with the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. So on the screen, you'll see our presentation here, and we're going to go ahead and go through this. So we have two core principles at the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. One is to preserve local decision-making, and the second is to protect shared revenue or local revenue bases. One of the things that we talk about with preserving local decision-making is people tend to live in cities where, based on several factors, some of them are jobs and education, climate, environment, and what we like to say is like-minded culture. And sometimes that is politics. The politics of Mohave County or the politics of Kingman aren't the same as the politics of Tempe, Arizona, or of Phoenix, Arizona. And so we don't want to treat individual cities as a monolith. Everybody has to have the same policies everywhere because, again, what fits for Tempe or what fits for Bisbee doesn't fit for Peoria and doesn't fit for Kingman. So that's one of the things that we continuously advocate for down at the legislature. If you see our publications that we put out, one of them is called the Municipal Policy Statement. It will always have these two core principles. One, preserve local decision making, and two, protect local revenue bases or shared revenue. Again, I put a photo on here. What we like to say is the government closest to the people governs best. If you look at any data set of surveys across the country, people feel like the government that is closest to them, that is the one that they are most confident in. Whether it's city council, so it scales up basically. City council is the highest, then it's, state elected representatives, and then the federal government, and it can even go even closer to that. You could go higher and say like, HOA board or something like that. So again, we like to try and preserve those local decision-making sources. And then protection of local revenue. So I'm actually going to come back to this side because one of the main keys or one of the main reasons that the league was set up initially in 1937 was for legislative advocacy. Back in 1937, it was set up with 32 cities or towns. And they basically wanted to have one unified voice at the legislature trying to influence or protect certain positions that cities held dear. And so that was why we were set up. Now, since 1937, in the 80 years since, we've taken on many other functions, but we still see our primary function as representing the interests of the cities at the legislature, in the governor's office, being your voice down at the Capitol as a collective 91, as opposed to individually Kingman trying to advocate on every piece of legislation. So if I go back to the protection of local revenue, the big one for every city is the state shared revenue base. That's about 39%. If you go on aggregate and you look at all of our cities, that's about 39% on average for every city of your total revenue base. So that is one of the things that we advocate for every single year to protect. And any type of legislation that comes about that would impact local shared revenue and impact the services that our cities and towns provide, we vehemently will advocate against those infringements. Highway User Revenue Fund, again, that is another form of local shared revenue. In fact, since 2001, Highway User Revenue Funds, relief funds have been swept in cities by a tune of $350 million. One of the things that we're proud of last year is that we got a piece of legislation instituted that would, it did create a new fee on the registration for vehicles. However, what that means is that they're no longer going to be sweeping funds from cities. Basically, cities for the last, since at least since 2001, but actually going all the way back to 1982, have been dealing with diminished revenues for our roads. And I always hear Sonny Borelli come up here and talk about come down to the legislature, and talk about the roads in Mojave County. And this is one of the issues that I think he's interested in and that we're all interested in, and that protection, or that bill was passed last year to bring more revenues to city from HERF. The protection of the model city tax code, again, every city has a little bit of a different model city tax code. Tom can actually go into that a little bit in greater detail, but we, again, believe that the government closest to the people governs best, and you guys should be able to determine what your base is, and that's one of the things that we try to protect as well. Residential rental, and so I'm going through some bills that have come up at the legislature in recent years that would have cost cities significant dollars and would have diminished your services or resources that you're able to have and provide to your constituents. So residential rental, there are cities that will tax rental spaces, and so we opposed that bill a few years ago. It would have been $100 million in local revenue. 42,000 of that would have been Kingman revenue. Again, that's 42,000 year over year that is being saved by defeating this piece of legislation. Construction sales tax, there's been an effort to change the way that construction sales tax is calculated. Construction sales tax is in upwards of $850 million for the city of Kingman. Changes to that legislation probably would have lost Kingman in excess of $137,000. I'm sorry, and we were able to defeat that. Last year there was a bill called Digital Goods that would have been $310,000 in annual losses for the city of Kingman that the league was able to defeat. And then a big one that is really an ongoing effort was PSPRS modifications, which started all the way back in 2014, actually, when the league set up the PSPRS task force and had several meetings over a period of 2 years, basically, to discuss how to change the PSPRS base. And I can tell you that for our largest city, I was recently doing calculations, and over a 25-year period, it saved that one city $1 billion. So if you transfer this over to your entire base of police and fire personnel, it'll be a significant savings, but they all still receive a defined benefit pension that they're able to rely upon when they retire. So that was a big piece, and we've continued to work on that legislation. In fact, my background is pensions, so I pay keen attention to what's going on with PSPRS and the Arizona State Retirement System. So with that, I'm going to go, unless there are any questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tom, and he's going to carry over the rest of the presentation.
So besides legislative advocacy, we spend a lot of time doing training with your staff and with the council. One of the important things that was mentioned to me today is some of you who are new on the council are going to be attending our newly elected officials training. We try very hard and we put our best resources forward on that training. We think that the information provided not only by other city staff and your colleagues in other cities and towns is very valuable. And we spend a lot of time talking about the difficulty in being an elected official and serving and how it changes your life. Those of you who are incumbents know what I'm talking about. Those that are coming on will soon find out, especially when you are a locally elected official. You can't go to the store unnoticed. The things that you say become news. And so we spend a lot of time talking about those things. But we also spend a lot of time with your staff. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that later. One of the things that I focus on as the Deputy Director of the League is our publications. So we both provide a lot of information to your staff about state shared revenue estimates. We do a budget compliant documents every year. It's called It's Budget Time, where we send out new information about what's coming out that will affect your budget. The changes that may have to do with publications of notices, things that may have to do with how much revenue you're going to have, things that are affected where you might be financing something through the state, or there's just a whole number of things that we include in that document. And so the shared revenue report and the It's Budget Time document go out in March, about the time that you're really in the middle of your budget. Most cities and towns right now are already starting to talk budget, but it gets into full swing in March, and we provide that information every year. We also have a budget and finance manual. One of the things that I focus on, again, as the Deputy Director, is working with your finance officers. So every Monday during the legislative session, I have 2 phone calls. One is with the finance directors, and we talk about bills that have anything to do with money and finance and budget. And we talk about public reports and elections with your clerks. And so what we do there is we get information about what the bills are trying to do, and they give us feedback on whether or not that's something that we should be concerned about. And it's a great partnership that we've had for many years now, close to a decade. And it's very helpful to us to know how to lobby specific legislation. And it's important because this is a way for your staff to know what's going on and to be involved, because, again, they know better than us locally what's going on and the kinds of needs that you have. We also, from time to time, will do specific commission reports. So, for example, we did a construction sales tax study where we had a task force that sat down and took a look at our current system and possibilities for making a change that would focus on 2 things. One, to make it easier for people to comply with how they remit their taxes to the state, and also to make sure that we maintain revenue. One of the things that is difficult sometimes when we are working on these things is that we want to make sure that people understand we don't take our taxation lightly. We need the money to provide services, and so we spend a lot of time talking about being better about making it easier for taxpayers to pay while trying to maintain our revenue sources. And so the Construction Sales Tax Task Force had people from the industry as well as cities and towns talking about that, and it influenced legislation later on. Every year we put out a new laws report. At the end of the legislative session, we read every single piece of legislation that the legislature introduces, regardless of whether it gets a hearing or not. It's well over 1,200 bills, and we make sure that those bills don't affect the cities. If they do, we set it aside, and that's when we go and we gather data and analyze what it's going to do. And at the end of the session, we will go back and we create a bill or a report that has all the bills that affect cities and towns and exactly how they do that. And we will also, from time to time, talk about specifics. We will create reports about specific bills and how cities and towns will comply with the new legislation. That is reflected again in our publications like our Budget and Finance Manual and our Election Manual. The Budget and Finance Manual, obviously, for the finance directors in your city, and then the Election Manual for the clerks. Again, this is something that is unique to the League because every city and town conducts their elections in basically the same fashion, and there are things that every city and town has to do exactly the same way. And it makes sense for an organization that represents all the cities and towns to do that. Transparency requirements, again, what the legislature and what and what their constituency want is to make sure that cities and towns are providing information to the public in a transparent way, in a way that makes sense so that people know what the cities are doing. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that you know all the things that you have to be transparent about. We create model ordinances. You can see a list here. Again, it's when it makes sense for us to have some uniformity across the state in specific instances. And so where a city or town, medical marijuana is an excellent example. It's since it's something that the state Department of Health Services is really has a compliance role in. We are making sure that all cities and towns are conducting those the taxation and the regulation of medical marijuana facilities in the same manner. And so it made sense to have a model ordinance for that, and there's several examples there. The Municipal Tax Code Commission, cities and towns have a sales tax code that in some ways is exactly the same as the state and in other ways differs from the state, depending on the item. We have created more uniformity, but there are certain things that the state doesn't tax that we do tax, and that's the importance of the model code to cities and towns. We have a Municipal Tax Code Commission that is chaired by, and all the members are mayors or council members from cities and towns across the state. And we take items that has to do with transaction privilege tax or sales tax. And the Municipal Tax Code Commission is something that we staff. We talk to the mayors and council members on that commission about what they're going to be seeing coming across their desk and why it's important to cities and towns. The City Tax Administrators Council, the CTAC, also gets together to talk about tax issues that come up that we need to make, that we need to analyze and that we need to get information to the Department of Revenue about. So those are policy development groups that city and town staff and also their employees participate in. The City Attorneys Association is one of our 4 professional development associations. We have the City Attorneys Association, the Arizona City County Management Association, the Arizona Municipal Clerks Association, and the Government Finance Officers Association of Arizona. All of those are staffed by league staff. The primary purpose of all of those professional development associations is to make sure that your clerks, finance directors, city managers, and city attorneys have an opportunity to network and also to get the latest in court decisions, in state statute, federal statute, anything that affects your performance as a city or town. We make sure that they're aware of it, and many times there will be cities and towns that have specialized in it, and we're simply facilitating the training that is taking place. We don't necessarily always provide the training. Many times their colleagues provide it, but we facilitate all of those things. And again, it makes sense because your city attorneys have jobs. Your clerks have jobs. And so in order to do it effectively, it makes sense to have the league staff do that on their behalf. We are also associated with the National League of Cities. We have a liaison, and when we do every once in a while, it's not a big part of what we do. We are focused on state issues mostly. However, there are federal issues that do affect cities and towns from time to time, and we work with the National League of Cities to work with our state delegation on those issues. We also have something that we are proud of. In the last 3 or 4 years ago, we formed league policy committees. And so from time to time, we will make an invitation to you. If you have an issue that you think the legislature needs to consider, we invite you to work with your city staff to move forward that idea to a league policy committee. Let me give you an example of what I mean. I sit on the General Administration, Human Resources, and Elections Policy Committee. It's affectionately referred to as the GAHRE, GAHRE, and we love our acronyms in government. So, and the GAHRE considers election policy issues. One of the clerks in the city of Peoria talked to her mayor and her folks that work at the legislature as well to talk about a particular issue that they wanted to see move forward related to campaign finance. They brought it to the policy committee. The policy committee agreed that it needed to be changed. It became part of at our annual conference. It became part of our legislative agenda, and we moved it forward, and the bill got passed, and we made that change to campaign finance. It was not at all controversial, and the legislature recognized where the cities and towns were different from the state in this particular realm, and so we got a lot of support, and we were able to move it forward. The league policy committees give us an opportunity to develop and get a chance to really look deeply at the policy issues before we take them to the conference to consider them in our overall legislative agenda. We do legal work from time to time. I'm sure Carl is very familiar with things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so just some examples that I'll talk about here. There was a time that we actually, we talked about the protection of shared revenue. There was a governor that at one time that decided that they were just going to sweep $27 million from our urban revenue sharing. Didn't talk to us about it, didn't come to an agreement, they just swept it. And the league sued, and we won. And so of that $27 million that's distributed to cities and towns in shared revenue, that would have been approximately $200 million or $200,000 to the city of Kingman. 1487 claims, if you're not familiar with that, there was a fairly recent bill that was passed that said that if the legislature passes a bill and you are not complying with it as a city or town, they can take all of your shared revenue unless you cease and desist. Now, the focus of this has mostly been our charter cities who do have some things that have some power that's different from the state. But we help with those 1487 claims, and we work with the attorneys to make sure that we're providing all the resources to that city or town that they may need as they fight or as they work to resolve that particular claim. One of our brightest stars, I think, is our annual conference. It's the largest gathering of local elected and appointed municipal officials in the state. We have over 1,300 people attend our conference every year. We get kudos from all sectors. State legislators attend this meeting. They find it very, very useful. They basically get to hold court. They come and they have access to all of their locally elected officials that they represent. And we've talked about some of your local legislators are there. They're friends of the league. They work with us. One of the things that we want you to understand is that we work very hard to keep good relations with our elected officials. And even though we may disagree at times, we always want to be seen as honest purveyors of information. We try very hard to be fact-based, to do things that we do not on anecdote, but on factual data. We spend a lot of time developing data that we base our decision-making on. And so we depend on your employees to get us that information, and it's, as I had mentioned, it's been a great partnership over the years. We think this is the most important municipal event of the year, and we hope that you will all consider coming. I want to point out that many people see conferences and trainings as a big party. This, I hope that you understand that we take this very seriously. We spend a lot of time on our agenda, and we think that it is a great networking opportunity, but you will find that the sessions that we offer are very serious and they're very timely, and we think that it'll be well worth your while to be there. I talked about newly elected officials training, so I'll keep moving. We also have quarterly trainings that we offer on a variety of subjects, and you can see there all the different subjects that we've offered. This is just over the past 2 years, and it's a wide variety of things. And again, that training is free to members in this particular instance. And we also help develop the training that they receive through their professional development associations. I've already talked about those. We also have what I like to refer to as leverage professional services. One of the great services that, and I think that, in fact, I'm pretty sure that Kingman is a member of the Arizona Municipal Risk Retention Pool. That is your liability insurance. That's a very important part. When you become a government, when you incorporate as a city, the first thing that happens is people start to sue you. It's unfortunate, but that's what happens. And so one of the things that we did way back in the early 1980s is we set up the Arizona Municipal Risk Retention Pool. And you have to be a league member in order to receive its services. And so 71 cities and towns, 71 of our 91 are members, and we're very proud of the coverage. And not only that, but we spend a lot of time through the risk pool training, again, about what kinds of things can we do to help you reduce your liability. Providing training to elected officials and to city staff to make sure that you know, hey, this kind of thing can get you in trouble. This kind of thing keeps you on the right side of the law, so to speak. So we spent, again, a lot of time with that. And this is all about developing trust in you and your staff from the public at large. It's a very important thing. Knowing what you need to do and making sure that you're complying with the law is a very, very important part of what we do. We have a private lobbying contract that assists us during the legislative session. We sometimes, depending on the type of issue that we're looking at in court, we also might contract specialized legal services that, again, we will go back to the cities and we will work out some kind of arrangement to pay for those. We also have media and social media contract services that we provide. And this is, a lot of it is focused on the legislative session. As you might imagine, during something as big as the legislative session, often there will be some misinformation out there about how and why we do things. And in this day and age, social media is very important in getting out your message and making sure that people understand why you do the things that you're doing. And so we spend a lot of time on that. That is a very quick kind of survey of what we do and what we spend time in doing on your behalf. And Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have a question?
Hey, Mayor, I was wondering if I could just ask a quick question.
Certainly, Mr. Cooper.
I'm sure you're aware that we have some interest in the election manual, and because I'm sure you're aware that we had a case that didn't go well for the city's position following the election manual. And we were wondering if there's any chance that the league would be working with the city. Of course, I know the answer is yes, you're working with the city, but what are you doing to help the city to kind of correct the issue that we encountered?
Thank you for asking that, Carl, because I intended to talk about that anyway. Sometimes when we're working and as you know, just going through this election cycles, elections can be contentious at times. And so one of the things that we do, again, is work very closely with the attorneys, and we put together an election manual. Now, I would love to say that everything in the manual is absolutely statutorily based. Sometimes state statute doesn't give you direction on things. And so we have a test that we call the reasonableness test. And we say, if a reasonable person looked at this situation, this is how they would decide it. And that's how we base some of the opinions that we have in the election manual. In this particular instance with Kingman, judge didn't see it that way. So what we do in those situations is that it's a good idea then to take it to the legislature and provide that clarity that we need at the legislature. So there's a particular bill that we're going to be working with the city. The mayor already mentioned as we were talking about this subject tonight that we're going to be working on getting a sponsor and those kind of things. But our attorney has already drafted language to deal with the write-in candidate issue that you had. And so we're happy to provide through the clerk our copy of what we will be moving forward that was developed. It's a very brief, very simple approach to making sure that write-in candidates, you know, in order to be elected, they have to get as many votes as it would have taken them to get onto the ballot. And so anyway, that's that's the basics of it. And again, this is will be a bill that we will be introducing and we'll be testifying on at the legislature.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Belshi? Any comments? We appreciate very much you being here. We appreciate the partnership with the League. And having attended several of the annual conferences, I can attest that they are very, very rewarding. I learned a lot at all the work sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
The next order of business is legislative process and platform, and I think we have Colleen Haynes, our public relations person, to speak to us.
Yeah, real quick. Oh, never mind. Nope. Thank you. Hi, I'm Colleen Haynes. I'm your Public Affairs Coordinator and your newly appointed intergovernor person as well. So today we're just going to briefly kind of give you the 30,000-foot view of the legislative topics that I'll be following with the help of the League as well as our private lobbyist firm. I guess I'm just going to call you the Dorn Group for now. So we'll just kind of get started. Okay, so the main priorities, you guys also should have this handout that will kind of give you more description of what I'm going to go over tonight, just so that you're not really drinking from a fire hose too much. So the three main priorities that we're going to follow is water, election reform, which has already been discussed this evening, as well as transportation. So we'll, kind of get into water first. So what's happening with water, what we're following, kind of the top view, is an RFP for a study. The RFP actually closed November 28th. We should find out by the end of the year what firm will possibly get that study. There was 4 people that went up for it, so they'll work in line with the USGS on a study that they're doing about our aquifer, how much water is in it, how much is being taken out, how it's being replenished, and then we can move forward from there. Other discussions that we're following is a rural management area and RMA. RMAs do not exist in this state right now. Only AMAs do. There's 5 of them. I talked with Cole from the Dorn Group. We kind of, I'm deeming it the I-10 kind of AMA, because it is Prescott and then Phoenix, Tucson, Santa Cruz. So kind of down through the middle of the state, those 5 AMAs, about their active, how they manage their water. There is no rural water management right now, and I don't think that that's going to happen until this study is done, at least in our county. If you have any questions, please feel free to stop me now, during, or you wait till after. Whoops, I don't know why I keep going. Here we go. Uh-oh. Okay, election reform, already been touched on with the change in language and the issue we had with our election. Transportation, the big priorities we're looking at with transportation is the I-11 corridor interchange projects and funding, and working with different agencies statewide to secure funding, the ADOT 5-year plan, and then also a build grant that was applied for. We'll find out December 18th if we receive those funds, and then the council will have to decide going forward what to do with that. And then we'll just kind of get into like a kind of a big picture overview, other than those 3 priorities of things we're going to be following, as far as preserving local decision-making, existing revenue sources, local investments, and just kind of those descriptors, infrastructure, what we believe as a city, how it will affect us moving forward, what we will support, what we'll be against. There's no bills posted right now, so I can't go into any specifics of bills we will be following. Hopefully, bills will start being posted maybe next week, and then we can kind of start sending out reports as those become available of what we're going to be following. Transportation, transit street maintenance, you know, like I said, you can follow along with this. It's really more descriptive. I don't want to, you know, read it to you. There's a lot to take on as far as what could possibly affect the city and or staff or the way we would operate moving forward. Once again, you know, working with different agencies regarding funding. Another topic I want to bring up with the fiscal policy, revenues and taxes is the kind of Wayfair policy. You guys should have a handout that was provided by the league. That was actually an updated version just this morning sent. And it's very descriptive of kind of how we don't fall in line with the current policy that our Department of Revenue has compared to other states and how that can be corrected. The cautionary tale I want to offer is that the big myth of oh my gosh, we're going to get rich once this passes. No, it's not going to be a windfall of money for the state, for cities, towns, counties. It's not. So just want to have that cautionary tale there, and that descriptor, that, you know, one-pagers is very informative of the taxes that Arizona is already collecting from the Wayfair type of online businesses. It's 83 out of the top 100, so it's not like Arizona's behind the curve in collecting online sales tax. This is just another policy that has to be instituted. Planning and growth, we'll look at economic development, development fees, land use planning, regulatory reform, and just make sure that those types, any policy that comes forward, that's really how it will affect Kingman. We all realize Kingman is not Phoenix. We all realize that we're, you know, northwestern rural Arizona. We're not southeastern rural Arizona. So we are just paying attention to how each of these bills on all these different topics will affect our city in general. Working with the police chief, just following his bills. He's also part of an association as well that provides, you know, their information to them. So I'm pretty much touching base with every department of different bills, how they will affect departments, and kind of combining all that with reports from the league, reports from the Dorn Group, and then handing and giving that information to you so you can make your best decisions. I do want to bring up, the chief, I can mention, one of the bills that is, I believe, already sponsored, is this public safety employment changes and reimbursement. So I don't know if do you want to go into details? Well, I'll go into a little bit of details. So what happens is, you know, Kingman trains our police officers, then they walk across the street and get a job for higher pay, and we're out all that training money. So this bill will help correct that. And local operations, you know, just as far, we've already touched on elections. Once again, that's a priority that we're looking at. I know, obviously, we do not have anything to do with the library, but if there was ever an instance where the county or the state or something happened with the library and we had to then work out how that we could remain, those doors to remain open, that would just be a topic that we would follow as far as funding for some county services that we might end up providing it. It's happened before, trust me. And then all these other supporting partnerships that we have. So I just, like I said, I wanted to give just a very brief 30,000-foot overview for your first meeting and not scare you too much. And once those reports start coming out, you know, you'll be much more informed of how it's going to affect Kingman. And then we already have a Tri-City Legislative Day set up. I've already made partnerships with the Intergov in Bullhead and Havasu, and this is the date we agreed on, so hopefully y'all can be there. And what we'll do is we'll arrive for lunch. The league will debrief us on any issues that are kind of facing our city or things we need to talk about our legislators with. And then the legislators will come in, we'll have lunch with them. It'll be very brief, very quick, and then maybe the rest of the day we can go sit in some committees or testify and then see how it's done. So that's it. Any questions? And it was very quick. I'm a fast talker.
Are there any questions for Colleen? Thank you, Colleen.
Okay.
So on February 6th, that is a date for Tri-City Legislative Day. Will the city be arranging for us to travel to Phoenix? Okay. information to follow. Thank
Yes,
you.
thanks.
The next presentation is on diversity and civil rights. And I think David Rice, is he here to lead this presentation? And there's some students, or a student.
Good evening. My name is David Rice. I'm a biology teacher, philosophy professor, speech and debate coach, and Gay Straight Alliance sponsor at Lee Williams High School. I'd like to thank City Manager Ron Foggin and everyone for getting this on the agenda in such a timely manner. I'd like to thank our new council for letting me speak this evening on a topic that's very important to many of us. As you're no doubt aware, currently there are no federal or state level guarantees of civil protection for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer and questioning, or LGBTQ individuals. This has led municipalities across our state and others to come together to amend their local civil ordinances to extend these categories of protection to their citizens. We come before you this evening simply as citizens of the city of Kingman, asking you, the newly elected council, to amend the civil ordinance of the city of Kingman to include such protections for LGBTQ individuals. I brought with me a student here tonight to share her perspective with you.
Hello.
Hello.
As a senior in high school, it'd be very comforting to know that when I go into the workforce, I will not have to worry about something like my sexuality holding me back from something like getting a job or even losing one. Adding this amendment is adding not only a civil right for LGBTQ, but a moral right for everyone in the community. That's all I have to say.
Also wishing to speak on the issue is Ben Rodenbeck.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm Deacon Ben Rodenbeck at Trinity Episcopal Church, and we brought this idea to Mr. Rice last year. A couple of months ago, a TV show came out that labeled Kingman the most racist city in America. I don't know that I agree with that perspective, but it is out there now. Now everybody sees Kingman as a racist city. We as a community need to combat this idea. We're not the most racist city in America, but we are a very warm and welcoming community. And as such, it behooves us to offer these warm and welcoming rights to our LGBTQ population. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Rice, did you have any other speakers as part of this presentation?
I do have one more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for letting me address you tonight. In 2001, I moved from Kingman to Minneapolis, St. Paul, where I got a huge dose of culture and diversity in 8 years before I moved back to Kingman. And as it was touched on, we currently have a pretty nasty image out there as far as Kingman goes. And this is definitely an opportunity for our new city council to show compassion, empathy, support of those who all too often don't receive such. I know that all too often we see LGBTQ as an other issue because it may not apply to us directly. We think that if we raise our kids well or in a church setting, that maybe they'll grow up and be normal. I'm here to tell you that I know personally somebody who is raised in a very conservative, very religious family, who is also in a culture in his small family of extreme machismo. And he recently harmed himself, and that's how the family became to know of his sexual orientation. And As soon as the family was made aware, surprisingly enough, maybe because it was one of their own, they rallied around this young man and supported him. And I've had the privilege to watch a previously extremely reclusive, isolated young person blossom and start feeling good in his own skin. I just want to throw a few statistics out there just to show you guys kind of what impact non-tolerance has on people. 80% of gay youths or LGBT youth report severe social isolation. 42% report living in an unwelcoming environment. 92% of adult LGBTQ people report that they think that things have become a little more supportive in the past decade. And 92% of youth LGBTQ folks are hearing negative messages all too frequently in their life. I think this is the City of Kingman's opportunity to give those people a positive message, to make these people's living environment more accepting and comfortable. And that's all I have for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Leonard Walker, and I come here not representing the organizations or groups that I belong to, but I come here as a gay married person here in Kingman. So I come to represent myself and my husband, and to express the great pride that I have in the Gay Straight Alliance at the school under Sir Bryce. And having gone with Deacon Ben to make this presentation about this proposal, the pride that I take in the youth being the ones to present this to you, that shows that it truly is an issue of the future. I'm now retired. It's not something that I would have to deal with in terms of the workplace. It is something that we as a couple would still be concerned about in terms of services to us as a couple. We've not experienced any terribly negative things about that, thank God. But I think that it's very important to protect the rights of LGBTQ persons in employment especially. And one can find in the manuals like of KRMC, the protection for a variety of people, but the LGBTQ is left out of that, of their protections. They are a very open and welcoming employer, however, in town. So I speak not against them. I'm grateful that I'm retired from them. However, it's important to note that to protect the youth who will be graduating and getting training will be able to, with confidence, not worry about such things in wherever they get employed, whether it be a small business or a large business. So this is a very personal and important issue for me and my husband. So thank you for allowing me to speak and to support this initiative by the Gay Straight Alliance.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
So I hope to provide you a little bit of a cross-section of the community of Kingman this evening to impress upon you the importance of this to us, and I'll stand open for questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from the council?
I have. What we're talking about tonight, this is for you, Mr. Vaughan, is just whether or not there's support to move this forward. Is that correct?
Really, the opportunity was to have the presentation made to get everybody thinking about it. We would have, with Mr. Rice's help, have identified a piece of legislation that was adopted by a neighbor community and would work that through and bring it to the council for their consideration. So.
Perfect. I just wanted to say that, First, I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight. My only disappointment is that it's 2018 and we're just now considering putting these protections in place. I'm so proud of the Gay Straight Alliance for their courage to bring this forward to the city. I think that, well, I know that it is paramount that our city supports equality for all of our citizens, and that we put these protections in place so that we protect all of our citizens, not just certain groups. So thank you very much for coming tonight, and you have my full support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other comments or questions? So we will expect that to come forth to council in a near future. Okay. Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very much.
Rice. Next order of business is the first quarter fiscal year 2019 financial review and TPT collection report, Finance Director Tina Moline. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, good evening, Mayor Miles and council members. How are you this evening? So good to see you all here. Tonight, I'm going to provide you with our first quarter fiscal year 2019 financial review, which is made up of our July through September revenues. And I'm also going to provide our first quarter TPT collection report as well. And so I'm going to start with our general fund, and I'm only going to report on a few of the funds, but just to give you an idea of how we're performing this year. So when we look at our total general fund revenues for fiscal year 19, we are at just about $7.1 million. Now, when we compare that to fiscal year 18 at the same time, it's going to appear that we are down 4%. And I don't know if you recall or not, but when I provided our annual review, our pre-audit review back in October, I stated that we were changing the way that we were reporting and the way that we're doing accruals. And so because of that, fiscal year 19 looks like we are actually down. However, if we were to report the same way that we were reporting last year, we would actually be up slightly. So there's no reason for concern whatsoever. And if we look at our fiscal year 19 budget, what we had estimated to receive, you'll see in total we're almost at 25%, which is where we should be about this time of year. So there is no reason for concern at this time at all. So we're doing just fine in our general fund. When we look at our expenditures, where we are for the first quarter as well, you're going to see that we have expended $6.1 million. And that is actually an increase of about 3% over last year. However, we would normally be at about 25%, but we have only spent about 21%. So we have underspent what we have expected to spend the first quarter. Below there's a line chart, and it actually shows where each general fund operating budget is as far as their budget is concerned. Are they below the 25% for the first quarter? Are they above it? And you'll see that there are a couple of departments that are over the 25% first quarter budgeted amount, and you're going to see that part of that is actually the city council's budget. It's a very small budget, and a piece of that has to do with a conference that takes place in August. It's a large expense, and so we've already expended some of that. So that's the reason for the city council's budget to be over their regular 25%. And then when we look at the city attorney's office, we are very well aware that the legal fees in the city attorney's office are more than we would have expected to spend the first quarter. Overall, it will be fine, but the first quarter we've expended more than 25%. And then the finance department, and that has to do with our audit taking place the first quarter as well. So there's a reason for those three departments expending more than 25%. Moving into the HERF fund, we'll look at the HERF fund fiscal year 19 revenues to date, and they're almost $978,000, and they are down slightly. Again, that has to do with the way that we're reporting this year, because we are changing the way that we're reporting on taxes and state shared revenues, and those are two of the very largest contributors to our HERF fund. If we were to be reporting the same way that we reported last year, we would actually be ahead of where we were in fiscal year 18. And you'll see that we've we've collected a few more percent more than what we expected to collect in the HERF fund for the first 3 months. And then looking at the expenditures, we are ahead of where we were in fiscal year 18, so we've spent 11% more at this time. However, as far as budget-wise, which would be 25%, we've only spent 7% of what we would expect to spend. Part of that has to do with the unknown of the election, and so the Streets Department was very conservative with their spending the very first quarter. I do just want to make a point that there was, in fiscal year 19, a transfer of just about $4 million from our pavement preservation fund. However, due to the outcome of the election, that is going to decrease by about $1.2 million to $2.8 million. So their budget will decrease by about $1.2 million. And then when we look at a few of the other funds in total, we've got our big enterprise funds, water, wastewater, sanitation, and now the airport as well. They're pretty much in line. We're slightly ahead on revenues of where we were in fiscal year 18. That's expected for each of those funds. And we are ahead of where we expected to be the first 3 months. And when we look at the airport fund, we don't have any prior historical data for that fund, as it's a brand new fund. But we've collected $318,000 year to date. And we are expecting to collect about $1.6 million. And you'll see that we've only collected about 20% of those revenues so far. However, part of that is because we're expecting to receive some federal grant monies that we have not collected yet, and we'll be collecting those later in the fiscal year. I have the Powerhouse on here only because I just want to point out how fantastic the Powerhouse is performing on revenues. They're 74% ahead of where they were last year at this time, and they're a small fund. But again, I just wanted to point out that they are really performing. A lot of it is not just tourism activity, but it has to do with the way that they are really promoting and marketing their merchandise as well. And then when you look at those same funds, expenditures, you'll see, again, we are slightly ahead of where we were in fiscal year 18. It makes complete sense. We've added people to those particular funds this fiscal year, and we also had a one-time special distribution to our personnel. So the costs are going to increase that first quarter. And then when we look at budget overall, you'll see where we are as far as the 25% level for budget in those funds as well. So overall, we are exceeding our fiscal year 18 revenues, and we are not spending as much as we budgeted for the first quarter. So that is the first quarter fiscal year 19 financial review, and I'll move right into the TPT collections unless you have some questions on those other slides first.
Are there questions?
I just had one question. Have we made this information available to the public? And if so, can you explain how the public can access that information?
Sure, absolutely. And no, we have not. You're the first to receive the report, but I can certainly post it on our website under the Finance Reports tab and keep those presentations updated as I report those to the council, both anytime I report TPT collections and our financial reviews.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Councilman Waite. Any other comments or questions on this section of the report? Okay, thank you.
You're
We'll
very
move on.
welcome. All right, moving on to our TPT collections. So our TPT collections is comprised of several business codes. We have several that, and we have retail, that is our largest business code. As you'll see, almost 60% of our total collections are generated by our retail businesses. The second contributor are restaurants at about 16%, and hotels is our third. After that, we've got construction, utilities, leases, tangible personal property rentals, and then a whole conglomeration of about 6 or 8 others that make up that small 1% category. So our total TPT collections to date, looking at fiscal year 17 through fiscal year 19, I've broken it out into two different charts. One excludes the additional 1%, so we have a historical baseline for trending the data, and then including the additional 1%. When we exclude the additional 1%, we are still exceeding fiscal year 18's collections at this point at 3.8%. We've collected about $4.9 million. When we include the additional 1%, we have exceeded fiscal year 18 by close to 39%. So we have collected almost $6 million to date. Looking at those business codes, I wanted to break out the dollars by business codes so that you could see how each of the business codes are also performing. So our largest business code is our retail business code, and you'll see that we are actually underperforming in fiscal year 19 for the first quarter compared to fiscal year 18. And in another slide, I'm actually going to break out the different the 5 largest categories within the retail and use category, so you can see where we are experiencing that decline. Restaurants and bars are up almost 10%, and hotels are also up. Construction is up, utilities are up, residential and commercial leases are up almost 64%. And I want to touch on that just real briefly. That's a particular tax that a lot of commercial and residential lessors are unaware of. And so we hired a third-party TPT auditor last year to perform a review of our collections. And what this particular auditor found is that there are all sorts of lessors that either are underreporting or not reporting because they are unaware. So we have begun to pursue those taxpayers, and that is a reason of why we are up. We are beginning to collect some of those revenues. So TPP rentals and leases are up, and then that other category, it's such a small piece of our total collections, it's down, and that's certainly nothing to worry about. So overall, we are up 3.83%, as I stated earlier, for the first quarter. This does exclude the additional 1%. I'm not reporting on that additional 1%. So as I said, the categories that make up that retail and use TPT collection, let's look at those 5 largest categories. We've got our motor vehicle and parts dealers, and you're going to see that for the first quarter, and this is the first time that we have seen this, for the first quarter in fiscal year 19, there is a drop of over 5% in that category. And so that is a big factor in why we are recognizing a 1.5% to close to 2% drop in retail and use tax. But when we look at durable goods wholesalers, that's up. Building material and garden equipment supplies are up. Food and beverage stores, it's pretty much the same year over year. And general merchandise stores are actually down slightly. So that just gives you some background on which categories we're experiencing a little bit of that decline. And I don't know the exact reason, because when I look at Lake Havasu's performance in both of those areas, they're not necessarily experiencing a decline, so I don't know the reasoning behind that. And then on your slide, I don't know, the slide that I gave you is completely incorrect. I don't even know where I got the data, so I updated the correct slide on what I'm presenting to you this evening. I just wanted to provide you with where we are versus what our actuals are versus where we are in the budget. Month and quarter to date. So when we look at September, our actual collections are about $6.6 million, and we budgeted at this point $6.35 million. So we're about 3.6% ahead of where we budgeted. And that's it for my TPT report. Are there any questions on that piece of it?
I have a question.
Councilwoman Scott Staley.
I would just like to clarify about the tax for leaseors.
Yeah.
If you have a commercial property or a home that you're renting out to somebody, do you pay a sales tax on that?
So commercial, if you have one, yes, you do. And so, of course, you would collect that from your lessee. If you are a residential lessor, you do, but it is only if you have more than 2 homes. More than two.
Okay, I thought we should clarify that here.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Mullane?
Okay.
Thank you so much for this information.
You're very welcome.
That's a
Thank you
good
very
groundwork.
much.
Okay, That concludes the work session items for tonight. So unless there is further business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion to adjourn has been offered by Councilwoman Nelson and seconded by Councilwoman Scott Staley. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We will reconvene at 7 o'clock.
It's so good for you. I mean, even they teach a chair class at the studio downtown, so you don't have to really be. Yeah, I mean, I want them to.
1 minute.
I want them to be able to come back here.
That's just funny.
Thank you.
Sure, yes.
I now call to order the December 4th, 2018 regular meeting of the Kingman Common Council. Good evening. City Clerk, could we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Miles,
Here.
Councilmember Keener,
Here.
Councilmember Lingenfelter,
Here?
Councilmember Nelson. Here. Councilmember Scott Staley,
Present.
Councilmember Watkins,
Here?
Councilmember Waite.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. For the invocation tonight is scheduled to be given by the Imam Umar. Is the Imam in the audience? Okay, could I ask Father Phil to come forth and give the invocation, and then we will follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. Father Phil?
No pressure.
Let us stand for the invocation.
Let us pray. Gracious God, in your word you have given us a vision of that holy city to which the nations of the world would bring their glory. Behold and visit, we pray, this and all the cities of the earth. Renew the ties of mutual regard which form our civic life. Bless us with honest and able leaders. Enable us to eliminate poverty, prejudice, and oppression, that peace may prevail with righteousness and justice with order, that men and women from different cultures and with different talents may find with one another the fulfillment of their humanity. Amen.
Amen. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The council may go into executive session for legal counsel in accordance with ARS 38431 A3, to discuss any agenda item. The following items may be discussed, considered, and decisions made relating thereto. First order of business is approval of minutes, and we have no approval of minutes because we are a new council. The second order will be appointments, and the first discussion and appointment will be that of the vice mayor. And I would entertain a motion for a nomination for the vice mayor, Councilwoman Staley.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have put a lot of thought into this, and there are a few things that I think should be considered. And the first would be that the vice mayor role normally goes to an experienced member of the council, somebody who is up to speed on all the issues that we are working on. They are also familiar with our budget and the city's priorities. The second item to consider would be what I believe is the most critical item that we have been working on. And we've been, that would be the I-11 East Kingman Connection project. And this item is critical to our future. It is something that this council has been working very hard on for the last couple of years. And with the change to the TPT and our revenue, we do have some work ahead of us to keep this project moving forward. So I believe that what we need to do is to have a vice mayor who is not only familiar with this project, but somebody that has experience in building and financing large capital improvement projects so that they can represent us along with the mayor at ADOT meetings, stakeholder meetings, meetings with our project manager, as well as the state. The only person on this council who has that kind of experience other than the mayor would be Travis Linkenfelter. And so I would like to nominate Mr. Linkenfelter to be vice mayor.
Thank you. Is there a second for that nomination?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Councilman Lingenfelter has been nominated for vice mayor by Councilwoman Staley and seconded by Councilman Waite. Are there any other?
Madam
I
Mayor,
think we don't take a vote on this. We're going to take a written vote.
Yeah, it just depends on how you want to run that process, man.
At this point, I would like to ask if there are any other nominations.
yes, Madam Mayor, I would like to nominate Councilwoman Deanna Nelson for Vice Mayor. I think she is up to speed. She has done a lot of homework on preparation for being a council member, and I think that she has the experience and could learn quickly and be able to do it.
Is there a second for that nomination?
I'll second that.
We have a nomination. We have a motion to nominate Councilwoman Nelson by Councilmember Watkins and seconded by Councilwoman Mello Keener. And at this point, if there are no more nominations, I would call for a written vote. Am I doing this correctly, Mr. Cooper?
We do it different every time we do this, so it kind of just depends on how each council kind of likes the flow to go.
Okay, let me put it this way. Can we find paper to do a written vote?
I have found paper and tore this up. So what you right now is basically you have two. This isn't according to Robert's rules, but that's all right. We don't have to follow Robert's rules.
We do have a motion and a second for each of the
So
candidates.
you have a motion, second for each one. So I guess my suggestion is we got a piece of paper. I'll pass it down. The person would have to write their name on that paper as well as the person they would want to vote for.
Okay.
That way we actually have a record of who voted for whom.
That makes sense. Before we do vote, I think I would like to ask both of the candidates if they would like to make any comments about their desire to be the vice mayor and why they are interested in this position.
Thank
Councilman
you,
Lingenfelter.
Madam Mayor. I'll be happy to go first. First of all, I'd like to thank Jamie for the nomination. I appreciate that. Over the past 2 years, really all I've done is championed what I ran on, and that was demanding performance at our airport and our industrial park, and trying to find a sustainable funding solution with the council for our general funded capital projects that are on the 5-year plan. Also a dedicated funding source for our streets, our pavement preservation. We've been working on the very serious water issue that we're seeing in Kingman. And we're also trying to push revitalization downtown. I've been proud to advocate at the state level as well, at the ADOT State Transportation Board meetings, working on the water issue. I was the one that brought the Water Advisory Committee issue to the council for consideration and adoption. So we take a proactive stance on water rather than a reactive stance. I look forward to continue advocating at ADOT. I was invited, and this Thursday I'll be joining Manager Foggin and Mayor Miles at the MCC Kingman campus for the advisory committee. I've been invited to represent the city on that, and I'm honored and privileged to do that. My family has roots here. I'm just privileged to serve in any capacity, and I thank you for the nomination.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Nelson.
Thank you, Councilman Watkins. I appreciate that. I've lived in Kingman 15 years, owned a business, a couple of businesses, and have had great success really working with every citizen out there. And I really do honestly appreciate the nomination. I think my background, I've always worked behind the scenes, and now I'm up front, and that working behind the scenes will definitely do us good justice. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I've called for a written vote, and I'd just like everyone to write down their name on the paper as well as the nominee that they are voting for. And then let's pass them down to Sydney, please.
It's okay, mine died mid-road.
All right, the votes were 4-3 for Councilman Lingenfelter.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Our new vice mayor will be Vice Mayor Travis Lingenfelter.
Madam Mayor, may I just read one more thing? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead.
I just want to read just a really brief statement, if I could. Congratulations to Mayor Miles and to each of our newly sworn-in council members on your election success. It has been a long and drawn-out year as our community of Kingman has debated the question of how do we want to fund city pavement preservation and general funded parks, public safety, and transportation projects that are contained on the city's adopted 5-year community improvements plan. There were strong opinions on both sides of the Prop 413 question. The city published educational brochures and videos. Campaigns were run on both sides. The vote was taken, and now we must continue to work forward under that decision. The past negativity must be left in the past, and tonight we must turn the page to a new chapter of community collaboration. We must work together to solve Kingman's long-standing infrastructure deficit puzzle, while doing what we can to increase livability for residents, tourists, and visitors, and as we do what we can in downtown and on our very serious water issue. I look forward to tackling those challenges, all of us together. And with that, I would say ever forward for Kingman, Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Next order of business will be appointments to Planning and Zoning Commission. The terms of commission members Gary Frederickson and Terry Shores will end on December 31st, 2018. Both commissioners are eligible for appointment for a second term and have indicated to staff their interest in reappointment. There were no other recent applications for the Planning and Zoning Commission at this time. Are either of the candidates here? Would either of them like to come forward? And, okay, I see that they are not here, and so I would entertain any questions or motion from the staff. I mean, from the council, sorry.
I'd like to make a motion that we give another term to both Gary Frederickson and Terry Shores. While I have not served on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I know that they have both been very involved, and they've been important members to that commission. So I'd like to make the motion that we do reappoint them.
Thank you. Is there a second?
You know, I know both of those individuals, and they are very hardworking on that commission, and I would second that.
We have a motion and a second to reappoint commission members Gary Frederickson and Terry Shores. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. The motion carries, and we have reappointed them to P&Z. I too know them, and I'm very thankful to have them stay on that commission. Next order of business is consideration of appointment to the Water Sustainability Commission. Citizen David Dale has applied to fill one of the 2 civilian positions on the Water Sustainability Commission. Council will consider Mr. Dale's application. Is Mr. Dale here? Would you like to come forward and give us a little information about yourself and your interest?
As you can tell from my application, longtime resident, longtime history working with water, around water, for water. I'm very interested in where we're at as a community, where we're going with our water. Everything else you guys talk about, infrastructure, tourism, everything else on the menu doesn't happen if we don't have water. I'm afraid we're behind the curveball. I think through my application and my history through Utah State, courses that I've done, work that I've accomplished through the Bureau of Reclamation, I think that I hold the qualifications and can offer something to that commission. I would respectfully request you guys consider my application. Any questions?
Are there any questions for the candidate? Thank you so much for your interest and your application. Has everyone had a chance to review his application? Do we have a motion on this item?
I would make the motion.
And I'll second that.
Motion has been made by Councilwoman Nelson and seconded by Councilman Waite to appoint Citizen David Dale to one of the 2 civilian positions on the Water Sustainability Commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it, and that motion carries. We move on to awards and recognition. This is an opportunity to hear comments by the newly elected council members and then the newly elected mayor. We would start with Councilman Watkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am thankful for all those who supported me and most importantly, my wife and family. They are dear to me and most important in my life. But then comes the citizens of Kingman, and I am thankful to be here and be able to serve them. And I want to listen, and I think it's most important that we are here to listen to you and respect your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Nelson?
I'm excited. I'm terrified. and all of those things rolled into one. So I look forward to moving Kingman forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Mello Keener.
I am just thrilled to be here. It's an honor. Looking forward to working with this council, just making good decisions for our beloved Kingman. I know we all have, that's our most important. We all have that in our heart. So I think we're going to do a great job together, and I'm just excited to be here.
Very good. Thank you. And now I have a few comments, and so I will open with saying I'm extremely grateful to serve as Kingman's mayor. It is a high honor, and I will work diligently to carry out the responsibilities mindfully. As I continue to serve the citizens of Kingman, I pledge to work with all council members and the community to ensure Kingman remains a city that is safe, livable, and prosperous. Having said that, we must all recognize that the passage of Proposition 413 results in a significant financial setback and will strain the resources required to grow and maintain the city. And as required by Prop 14, the city will now contract the budget and address the subsequent challenges of restructuring priorities. However, I believe in this city's management team, its citizens, and this council's ability to make the best of this situation. We will work together to build the city's financial base so that Kingman remains at the crossroads of a rich history and a bright future. As mayor, I pledge to facilitate a forum for honest dialogue for the council members and with the public. It is my intention that council meetings are fair, open to diverse opinions, and to civil discourse. It is time for discussions that respect various opinions and ultimately lead to a common ground that advances the best interest of Kingman and its citizens. As we move forward, I very much appreciate that the blueprints for Kingman's future are all in progress. I speak of the strategic master plan that is due early in 2019, the master plan for the airport industrial park, which is underway, a marketing and branding initiative, and a parks master plan. Together, these constitute a vision and a foundation for the future, and they will guide Kingman's growth and development for all target sectors in ways that promote economic progress and improve quality of life. I look forward to continuing our progress on several critical fronts. In particular, we will continue the work necessary to bring the I-11 East Kingman Connection project, including both the Rancho Santa Fe and Kingman Crossing interchanges, to fruition. All of the partners and stakeholders involved in these projects remain at the table, and I believe we can reach development agreements for each interchange that are win-win for all partners. The council will begin consideration of the Kingman Crossing Development Agreement later this month, and on the Rancho Santa Fe interchange front, the city is preparing to host the Arizona Transportation Board in January as we pursue partnership with the state to complete the project, and we are also awaiting word on our federal build grant application supporting the Rancho Santa Fe project. I remain committed to downtown revitalization. It is more critical than ever to attract tourists and non-Kingman residents who fund 40 to 50% of our sales tax revenue. We will continue to work with the downtown business entrepreneurs and the groups that are bringing vitality to downtown. The Main Street Group, Downtown Merchants, Route 66 Association, Art Hub, Center for the Arts, Beale Street Theater, and more. Together, we are leveraging our history and the magic of Route 66 to make Kingman a destination location. This council will continue to pursue strategies that encourage people to spend time downtown and throughout the city. As a city, water conservation and recharge will remain a top priority. We will utilize the Water Sustainability Commission that this council formed last year to help assess potential projects and recommend priorities. And that effort will be augmented as the city-county funded partnership to obtain the USGS modeling of the Wallapai Aquifer is completed. However, it is time now during this next legislative session to seek establishment of a groundwater management construct for Mojave County that will provide us with more local control and rulemaking capability. Toward that, we will continue working with the county Representatives Gina Cobb, Leo Biasucci, and Senator Sonny Borelli. Most immediately, this council will begin work to contract the budget. As we do this, we must ensure that the fiscal stability of the city is uppermost in our priority. I believe we must resist a natural desire to utilize general fund reserves to offset the losses from Prop 413. As concerns regarding a recession mount, preservation of our city's higher reserve cushions us from the losses associated with an economic downturn or disaster. Any city that relies solely on sales tax must be conservative in this regard. Instead, I will seek fact-based dialogues that lead to consensus on budget priorities, strategies for increasing revenues, and approval of expenditures. Because we must now work diligently to increase our revenue base, I personally will prioritize capital expenditures that promote growth, and I will endorse policy and project development that promotes long-term fiscal stability. In conclusion, I want to thank the city manager, city department heads, and the staff in their ongoing dedication to providing the best possible services to the City of Kingman residents. It is a privilege to work with them, and I look forward to a close collaboration in the next 2 years. I also equally want to thank the citizens of Kingman who elected me and the other council members to represent them during this time of critical decision-making. I welcome all members of the City Council to the dais. Let us move forward to represent our constituents well, providing strategic leadership, policy direction, and serving as good stewards of our city's assets and infrastructure. Let us seek to serve the greater good for Kingman and all of us who live here and love this city. Thank you. Now, moving on, it is time for call to the public. Comments from the public. Those wishing to address the council should fill out the request forms in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time. Comments from the public will be restricted to items not on the agenda with the exception of those on the consent agenda. There will be no comments allowed that advertise for a particular person or group. Comments should be limited to no longer than 3 minutes. I do not have any persons that have signed up to speak. And is there anyone from the audience who would like to make public comment at this time? Moving on, let us address the consent agenda. All matters listed here are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Do any of the council members want to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I did have just a few questions on some of these. If we could remove items F and L.
F and L. Any others? Can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda with the exceptions of item F and L?
So moved.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
There's been a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda with the exception of item F and L. All in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Item F, acceptance of a grant of a drainage easement being offered to the City of Kingman in conjunction with the recording of a parcel plat on Gates Avenue. A 3-foot wide drainage easement is being granted to the City of Kingman by Hesham and Michelle Sahani for property that is located on the south side of Gates Avenue across from the intersection with Golf Drive. The easement is intended to accommodate existing drainage impacting the property from the south, including flows from the Surback Cliffs Municipal Golf Course. The property is proposed to be split to accommodate future residential development. This item authorizes the mayor to sign acceptance of this grant of easement on the parcel plat. Councilman Waite.
Thank you. And I don't know who I could direct a question to. Okay, I'll just make the question and then we'll see who pops up to answer. Okay. Well, first I just wanted to confirm that this is an exchange where the city is granted an easement in exchange for splitting the parcel. Is that basically what we're talking about in this item?
You want to answer that, Greg? I guess you're going to get tag teamed.
All right.
Yes, Councilman Waite, it's not really exchange that's happening. The parcel is being split, but there's an identified drainage issue on one side that they're granting the easement as part of that parcel plat.
Okay, and so the parcel's already in the process of being split. This isn't necessarily an item wherein we were making the decision to allow it to be split. It's just, it's already being split, so they're allowing us an easement.
Correct.
Okay. Then I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ruggles. I would entertain a motion on item F.
I will make a motion.
I second that.
And so there has been a motion and a second to accept the grant of a drainage easement on Gates Avenue. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Ayes have it, motion carries. Item L, approval of professional services agreement with Sunrise Engineering for the Jagerson Avenue Sewer Project. Engineering 18-0054. The 2016 wastewater master plan study identifies the need to increase the capacity of the existing sewer line in Jagerson Avenue. This line was constructed in 1987 and is near to or at capacity and will be required to be upsized to accommodate future growth. The existing Jagerson Avenue sewer line includes a shallow crossing of the Mojave Wash. This wash crossing has required frequent maintenance work after rainfalls and monsoon seasons to ensure that it's protected from flows in the wash. Staff recommends that the City Council approve the agreement and authorize the mayor to sign the agreement on the city's behalf. Councilman Waite.
Thank you. And just as a preface to my questions on this item, I think that everyone on the council is going to be especially vigilant on items wherein money is being spent by the city, especially considering our financial situation currently. So in the materials for this item, it mentioned that the cost would be up to $84,400. That's how much the council would be approving if we were to move forward or to approve this action item. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And do we have any estimations as to what the maintenance cost? I know that in the materials it mentioned that we have had to spend money to maintain for maintenance costs as washes come through and as rains come. Do we have any estimation as to how much we've spent on maintenance up to this point, and how much this this purchase would save over time?
I don't have specific numbers on the maintenance that's been spent over the years. The line has been in the ground since the late 80s, I believe. And the concern that staff has, and the reason that we have this project on our capital improvement list, is there's a sewer line that crosses the Mojave Channel. It's the main drainage channel in North Kingman, and it has a tremendous amount of flows. And the way the sewer line's been maintained over the years is as the wash runs through and the sewer line becomes exposed, there's some concrete that's been poured over it. So it's never been properly engineered as a crossing of the wash. And if the sewer line were to somehow fail and come apart and discharge sewage effluent in the wash, that is a real big deal with the state. So the idea behind this project is to get a proper design, there's going to be a structural engineer involved, there's likely going to be some shafts that are drilled down to a depth below the scour level of the wash with columns, steel columns and concrete to support a sewer line. That's the main purpose of the project. I don't know those dollar amounts on the amount of maintenance that's been spent, but I know every time it gets exposed, there's a little more concrete that's poured around it to try and protect it. But it's not ever been properly engineered, and that's what we're seeking to do here.
And then, do we have any estimation as to man hours put into, fixing the same issue that occurs every time the wash gets filled up or a flood comes through?
Over the years, I don't have that number. I know it's probably been Public Works that's been handled that maintenance. I know the current wastewater superintendent's been involved. The previous one was involved, and the one before that was involved. So, but I unfortunately I don't have those dollar amounts or those numbers. But it may well exceed the 84,000 that we're talking about doing here. But again, the main concern is that we want to prevent that sewer line from ever failing in that wash. And given the amount of flows that come through here, that's the reason for this project.
Okay, so financially and for public safety reasons, that's probably something else that we're considering for this project.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay.
Mayor, just to finish that thought for Councilman Waite, and that is just a reminder that this is part of the sewer fund and not part of the general fund capital projects. So there's a user fee associated with the sewer fund. Obviously, we want and will continue to be conservative about what we bring, but just to let everybody know that this isn't necessarily something that's affecting general fund dollars. This is a sewer project that is based on sewer fees. And as Greg indicated, the penalties that we could face from DEQ and the EPA if we allowed this to break and just free flow would make the 80,000 seem like a really good idea. So,
Thank you, Manager Foggin and Mr. Henry.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
I would entertain a motion to go ahead.
I will make a motion to accept item L.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to accept item L and approve the professional services agreement with Sunrise Engineering for the Jagerson Avenue Sewer Project. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you. Move forward to old business. Resolution, item A, resolution number 5186, approving acceptance of winning bid for purchase of excise tax revenue obligations, Series 2018, to finance the Fire Station 2 relocation project as identified in resolution number 5180. Resolution number 5180 was approved by the council on October 2nd, 2018, which was the first step in financing process of Fire Station 2 relocation project. Resolution number 5186 approves the acceptance of the bid from First Convenience Bank and authorizes the city manager and financial services director to enter into the final purchase contract, trust agreement, and agreement for the with the First Convenience Bank. With voter approval on November 6, 2018 of the Responsible Sales and Use Tax Act, staff recommends council reevaluate capital project priorities and therefore does not recommend approval of resolution number 5186. Thank you. Director Moline.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. So, as the summary stated, back in October, there was an authorization to sell excise tax revenue obligations for the Fire Station 2 relocation project. That did allow us to go out, work with our private placement agent, and issue requests for proposals to any interested bank that might want to finance this project. We received 12 banks or bids from interested banks, and two of them, we received those on November 27th. Two of those banks were by far the clearly the most qualified bids based on the rates that they offered as well as the terms. So we were very interested in having a callable term, and both of those banks offered that. That was First Convenience Bank and Chase Bank. So after evaluating those bids with our placement agent, our special counsel, Mr. Foggin, and myself, we had decided that the winning bid would go to First Convenience Bank, and that is because the rate of the project would be, the rate for the financing would be just over 3%, so 3.04%. But what it also provided were callable terms, meaning callable terms where there was no prepayment penalty from the beginning. All you had to do was issue 30 days of written notice and you could actually call the bonds. So resolution number 5186 states that the winning bid would go to First Convenience Bank, and in the event that we would not be able to come to terms with First Convenience Bank, that we would use the runner-up bank, which was Chase Bank, who also offered a low rate of 3.08%. However, their call terms were, they did have a prepayment penalty up until 2026, which was one of the reasons why we went with First Convenience Bank. So that's what the resolution states. Now, the resolution allows us to borrow up to $5 million. If we were using First Convenience Bank's proposal and basing a borrowing amount on $4.75 million, our annual debt service payment would be about $416,000 over the term of 15 years. So I want to talk about two fiscal items, I guess, or financial items before we move into the recommendation and maybe have discussion. And one of those items, I want to talk about the fiscal year 19 adopted budget. When we put together the fiscal year 19 budget, we did that based on an assumption that we would continue to receive a 0.5% dedicated revenue stream for pavement preservation and a 0.5% dedicated revenue stream for our general capital projects, which were then identified as interchanges. And because those two projects were very expensive projects, meaning $6.4 million is what we would receive, then that general capital projects fund that we have that receives recurring revenues of about $575,000, we could then use those revenues for some other projects. Now, it is important to note that for the fire station 2, we know that we actually had debt for the airway underpass financing back in, the early 2000s that we were still paying on. And what we had said for the fiscal year 19 budget is that we would go ahead and pay off that debt and use that dollar amount, which is about $260,000 a year, to dedicate towards a portion of that $415,000 for the fire station, and the difference would come out of that $575,000. Now, again, that's a recurring annual debt service payment over 15 years. However, we made that assumption, and we know that the voters approved Proposition 413. So those two large types of capital projects, which are the interchanges and then pavement preservation, now somewhat compete for the same money that all of the projects are competing for. So that's the background behind the adopted budget. I also want to mention our fund balance policy and just quickly touch on it. And Mayor Miles mentioned it in her comments. But our fund balance policy was, the way that it is written today, was adopted in 2013. And what it states is that we will maintain a fund balance that is 25 to 50% of our budgeted operating expenditures and transfers. So when we look at fiscal year 19's adopted budget, or when we were going through the budget process, we knew that we were going to exceed that slightly. We were going to exceed the 50% level. Well, our fund balance policy also states that if we exceed a 50% level, then we will take those additional monies that are over the 50% level and dedicate them towards one-time expenditures, not recurring expenditures, but one-time expenditures. And so you chose to move those to our general capital projects fund one time. So our fiscal year 19 adopted budget, we are at a 50% fund balance level, which is about $15.73 million, and that's 50% of our budgeted operating expenditures and transfers. So we transferred just over $1 million to the General Capital Projects Fund this year, which allowed us to fund multiple different projects, but again, one time, not that recurring. And so because of that, staff is recommending to not approve resolution number 5186 until we can reevaluate priorities, we can look at our revenue streams, come up with alternative revenue streams, and look at our 5-year revenue forecast to determine where we're going to be. And whatever the outcome of that is, it is. But we don't feel that we're not comfortable recommending a financial commitment of over 15 years until we can reevaluate those priorities. So just the background on the recommendation and the project itself.
Thank you, Director Mullane.
Mayor,
Are there questions?
if I could just, I promised Tina that I would also jump in on this conversation, and she has identified it all very accurately. The thing that I would just finish with the period on this was that had the council not taken that increase in sales tax back in 2017, and as we worked through the budget and looked at capital projects, Tina and I came to the conclusion that we felt like the council they probably would have made different decisions based on capital projects, and the commitment of $416,000 a year for 15 years would have played a fairly large role in the decision making that the council made through the 2019 budget process. And knowing that that's a big portion of the capital monies that we are spending, that may have been a much larger spread than the council, or the expenditure would have been much larger than what the council was comfortable with. And so again, just as we look at this, the rate's good. We're pleased with the fact that we got 12 bids from banks, which shows that they have confidence in our finances, which is all good news. But just the opportunity to reevaluate the capital projects and priorities probably needs to happen before we commit, before the council commits to spending $416,000 a year for 15 years. So,
Thank you, Manager Foggin. If I'm understanding this, then this represents now a very big slice of what we have in terms of our debt capacity for the city to take on.
Well, I don't know about debt capacity, but it certainly eats into your capital funds.
Okay, thank you. Are there comments or questions from the council for Director Mullane?
I have one. Sorry. Okay. Removing it today doesn't mean we're going to have conversation January 8th, correct, about other options and other discussions, other availabilities, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Just to follow up on that comment, Manager Foggin, I know that the capital budgeting process as we go into the next fiscal year, it's going to be much more robust. I know that you guys are doing a survey right now. Is that going to be something that, as we regroup and plan on how we're going to move forward, is that something that we're going to look at as well, as far as what staff recommends, what the survey results from our community as far as what they believe is important? How is all that information going to be? Is it going to be presented on the 8th as well?
No, it won't be. Actually, the 8th will be part of just a regrouping, an update on where we are halfway through the year. It will be a discussion about what capital projects are in place, what the recommendations are for moving this fiscal year to the end of the fiscal year. We'll also have a 5-year forecast for expenditures and revenues. We'll also discuss, make sure that everybody's up to speed on pavement preservation and conditions of roads so that we're all playing from the same the same rules and understanding of those facets of city operations. But to speak to the budget process, we are starting the budget process. The sheets went out to the departments this week for capital project gathering, and as we move forward, we're planning on a council budget retreat for the end of February, first part of March, where we will bring to the council those capital projects. We will bring with us the survey results that the citizen survey provides, along with what challenges and opportunities departments see. And we're going to sit down as a group, both the leadership team and the council, and talk about what is going to be our strategic plan for the next couple of years, as well as my hope is that we're able to establish a strategic plan that takes us 5 years into the future, maybe even 10 years if we're successful with the retreat. So the process is going to be much more robust, but the 8th meeting will be a little too early for that. It will be just a look at 2019, not for future years.
Great. Thank you, Manager Foggin.
Are there, Councilwoman Staley?
Earlier during the work session, you gave us a figure about how much money is now going to come out of our street budget, the preservation budget. Can you remind me what that number was?
About $1.2 million.
So a little over $1 million will come out of this year's pavement preservation budget, and that's not even considering future years. And we know that we need at least $4 million a year to go into our streets to keep them from failing. That was part of the presentation that we received from Public Works some time ago. So $4 million's a minimum, and now we need to make up 1.2. And I think it's unfortunate that we're choosing between a new fire station and keeping our streets from failing, but I don't see how we have any other choice. So thank you, 1.2 million, thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for Director Mullane?
I have a question.
Councilman Wright?
Thank you. Obviously, the fire department, when they proposed this and when we first analyzed this, they presented to us specific needs that they were attempting to address with this new fire station 2. So I don't know if it's unreasonable to request that if we're going to reevaluate, perhaps they can come up with other options aside from a brand new building, maybe renovations or whatever the case may be, that might also address those needs that they had presented to us, and hopefully that can be part of that reevaluation if that's feasible.
So we will be providing a look at capital projects, in-depth capital projects. I do not know if we will have that for the 2019 budget year or not. That will be determined, I think, as part of our January 8th meeting.
Okay.
Yep. But yeah, all that's on the table, and again, we want to accomplish the things that the council wanted to see done with the budget. I mean, it's clear that we're concerned about livability, and this project, when originally brought forward by the fire department, didn't just talk about a fire station, right? It was also a conversation about improved training grounds for the fire department, which are extremely important to keep our firefighters and regional firefighters trained. As well as it also expanded the next door neighbor park, which, for me is near and dear to my heart. And I really would want to make improvements to the park as well. But that's something that we're seriously going to have to talk about as we move forward, because there's a whole bunch of priorities. And as indicated, I know I've fielded a number of questions throughout the last few months about what happens if Prop 413 passes, and that is that, you know, the bucket of money shrinks, and there's a lot of priorities that have been identified, and it's just a matter of relooking at those priorities and making decisions based on the reality that we find ourselves in today. So, and I think we're going to do our best to make sure that the council stays informed and is part of that decision-making process, and that we have a good budget process that we can stand up in front of the world and say that we're transparent, we're taking feedback, and that we're putting out the best product that we possibly can. And at the end of the day, this is all about livability in our community, which I've heard every single elected official talk about. So,
Are there any other comments or questions? I just wanted to ask you, Director Moline, that $1.2 million that came out of payment preservation is matched by $1.2 million this year out of capital projects. Is that right?
That's correct.
So we're really looking at that contraction of $2.4 million at the end of the day. And I recall that during all of our discussions of the fire station and training facility, which all of us felt very much that it would contribute to the livability, but in every presentation, the point was made that this was the type of thing that's contingent on the 1% being able to be kept in the budget. Now we are in a place where we are having to really look at projects that will expand our base, our revenue base, and those are things that we will need to be discussing at January 8th and beyond, because things have changed, and now priorities will need to be restructured. So thank you very much. Okay, so at this point, if there is no more discussion, I would entertain a motion regarding item A on the, to approve. It's a little awkward. The motion would be to recommend not approval if we agree with staff.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we deny Resolution 5186.
Thank you, Councilwoman Staley. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Councilman Lingenfelter. There is a motion and a second. I would ask that all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
No.
Motion carries 6-1 with the opposition by Councilwoman Nelson. New business. Public hearing and consideration of ordinance number 1880 for the rezoning of certain property located on Slaughterhouse Canyon Road from R110 residential single family 10,000 square foot minimum lot to R16 residential single family 6,000 square foot lot minimum. A request from KTH Consulting, applicant, and Munawar A. Parasha, owner, for the rezoning of certain property located on the west side of Slaughterhouse Canyon Road, south of Mission Boulevard, from R110 residential single family 10,000 square foot lot minimum to R16 residential single family 6,000 square foot lot minimum. The rezoning is requested to allow for the development of a single family subdivision with approximately 47 lots in an area of open space. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the rezoning request from R110 to R16 with conditions as stated in ordinance number 1880, including the need for a traffic impact analysis at the time of the preliminary subdivision plat of the property. Staff recommends approval. Mr. Ruggles.
Good evening, Mayor Miles, members of the council. This is a rezoning request from R110 to R16. It involves a property located on the west side of Slaughterhouse Canyon Road, south of Mission Boulevard. This is south of the Wallapai Mountain Road area. It would facilitate the development of a single-family subdivision with approximately 47 lots and an area of open space. There's a couple site photos taken from the Slaughterhouse Canyon Road looking west toward the property. The photo to the south, the lower photo is taken on the south side of the property looking uphill. There's an area of terrain, steep terrain on the southern edge of the subdivision, or of the property. This is the property itself, enclosed in the red box. Again, it's on the west side of Slaughterhouse Canyon Road, south of Mission Boulevard. The access to the area is either by Jackson Street from Walpine Mountain Road or from Adams. The property itself is zoned R110 currently. Property to the west is also R110, which is the Granite Bluffs 2 subdivision, which is a platted subdivision but is not actually developed at this point. And then on the east side of Slaughterhouse Canyon Road is Canyon Bluffs 2, which is a mostly developed subdivision zoned R16. And this is an aerial of the area showing approximately what the area looks like currently. You can see Canyon Bluffs to the east, which is a developing subdivision, and Granite Bluffs to the west, which is undeveloped at this time. This map showing where the existing water and sewer lines are in the area that would serve the site. So the site itself is about 11 acres. The general plan land use designation is medium density residential, 3 to 8 units per acre. This was part of the original incorporation area of the city in 1952. There was, the property was really split between 2 different zoning districts in 1971 when the sort of modern zoning districts were established. The southern part of the property was rezoned R110 in 2004, and there's no record of any development on the site. Physical characteristics, the north, I would say 2/3 of the property is relatively flat. There's a slope to the north, and the southern half of the property slopes steeply into the Slaughterhouse Canyon area. It's in flood zone X, which is not within a floodplain. Again, it's accessed off of Slaughterhouse Canyon Road. It's a paved street with a curb gutter and sidewalk on the east side where the existing subdivision is. The west side is currently not developed. Those improvements would be put in at the time of the subdivision development. So as mentioned, the applicant has submitted a conceptual layout showing 47 subdivision lots and 3 new streets. I'll show you that layout in just a moment. The subdivision will be, if this gets approved, will be before you at a later time. So any future lots that will be within the subdivision will have to meet the R16 dimensional standards. Future streets are also need to meet our width requirements. They were recently changed to 54 feet for local streets, so that will have to be addressed. I mentioned the slopes in the southern half of the property, or southern, I say third, where they are steep. The hillside ordinance limits grading in areas of 15% average cross slopes or greater. And the conceptual layout does show an area of open space being preserved in this area. And staff is recommending that be part of the development plan for the site. There's also a 15-foot wide trans-western pipeline easement located on the west side of the property. It's actually 30 feet wide, but half of it is on this property, half is on the property to the west. That easement will have to be left open and fenced. No accessory structures would be permitted within the easement. So one design consideration that they would need to make is make those lots a bit deeper to accommodate that easement. There's also a power line that crosses the southern portion of the property that will need to be relocated. We're also recommending that a vehicle non-access easement would be along the lots that border Slaughterhouse Canyon Road. Basically, that's an easement that prevents anyone from creating a driveway onto Slaughterhouse Canyon Road from those lots. There is a similar VNAE for the subdivision to the east, and they don't have any driveways directly to that street. So this is the conceptual lot layout. This is not obviously the final development plan for the site. This could change depending on the final design, but this gives you conceptually what the subdivision would look like. And the area just south of lots 44 through 47 would be the area that would be preserved as open space. So in accordance with the section 31.400 of the zoning ordinance, the Planning and Zoning Commission made findings on the following 4 items. First is on the demonstrated need for the uses permitted by the proposed zoning district. Both the R16 and R110 districts permit single-family homes, which are, as you know, a very popular form of residential development in Kingman currently. The majority of the single-family construction is on lots less than 10,000 square feet, so the demand for these types of lots appears to be there. Suitability of the district, it would be essentially a continuation of the zoning to the east, so it would appear to be suitable to the location and the surrounding community. As far as impacts of the change of zoning in the surrounding area, there would be some traffic impacts. R16 versus R110, you would be able to do more lots in the subdivision than you would otherwise be able to do. We estimated with 47 single-family lots, if that were to be developed, the traffic manual would estimate about 447 vehicle trips per day. If it was left at R110, it would be with approximately 30 lots, that would be about 285, so a difference about 162 trips per day. Cyrus Canyon Road currently functions as a collector, and that type of street should be able to handle at least 1,000 trips per day, which it would be less than that if the subdivision were developed with the 47 lots. Nonetheless, a traffic impact analysis is being recommended at the time of subdivision development to assess what traffic mitigation measures may need to be made in relation to the subdivision. And finally, conformance with the general plan, if the site is developed with 47 homes on 11 acres, the density would be just over 4 units per acre. The general plan projects 3 to 8 units per acre, so the rezoning request would be in conformance with the general plan. So the P&Z Commission recommended 5-0 to recommend approval of the rezoning request with the following conditions. One, areas on site with the average cross slope of 15% or greater as defined by section 21 of the zoning ordinance shall be retained for open space purposes with the existing slopes left undisturbed. So that's the area of open space we showed on the conceptual layout. 2, the developer shall work with Unisource Energy Services to relocate an existing power line that crosses the subject property. 3, future lot design shall accommodate the Transwestern Pipeline easement located along the western property boundary. And 4, the lot design will incorporate a non-access easement along any lots abutting Cyrus Canyon Road to prevent driveway access. So those conditions are reflected in Ordinance 1880, which is for your consideration this evening. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is also here this evening as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ruggles. Are there questions from staff? Councilman
Madam Mayor?
Watkins.
Rich, in Canyon Bluffs 2, I noticed it's zoned R16, but I know a lot of those lots that are along Slaughterhouse Canyon Road, at least the ones that are existing right now. I know I was doing a property search on the county website today on GIS maps, and a lot of those were more like 10,000 square foot lots. So the R16 must be to the east of that. Those lots, even though they're zoned that way, but a lot of those lots that impact Slaughterhouse Canyon Road are 10,000 square foot lots.
That's correct. There are some larger lots, especially at the end of Horseman Avenue where the cul-de-sac is. And that's primary because that's where the slope begins, so those lots had to be made a little bit larger to accommodate the slopes and have a building pad area that was able to accommodate the houses. So that's part of the reason. And again, R16 zoning that's the minimum lot size. They can always be larger than 6,000. That's always a minimum. So similar design, I would imagine, would occur on this property as well. There's going to be 6,000 is the minimum lot size, but there's certainly going to be lots that would be larger.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Ruggles, I'm sure P&Z that had public comments on this. Were there many people speaking during those public comment sessions?
To my recollection, there were at least 3 to 4 persons who spoke. And they raised some concerns over traffic in the area, access to Wallapai Mountain Road, the condition of Jackson Street, as I recall.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Are there any questions of staff?
Just one. The comments from the public that were in the surrounding area, that was the reason that the TIA, the traffic impact analysis, was recommended?
The staff was recommending it anyway, but that was.
Oh, for our
we did
guidelines.
point that out to them. Mhm.
Okay. And that will talk about whether or not you need another street light, what sort of traffic mitigation measures would be required as a part of the development. Is that right?
That would be the purpose of it, yes. Mhm.
Just a follow-up question to that.
Councilman Waite?
Thank you. The traffic, excuse me, the traffic analysis, who's responsible for that? Would that be the developer?
It would be the developer's responsibility, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then.
Do we have,
that's the-
Madam Mayor, can we comment on something on that?
I was going to ask,
Okay.
sir, I was going to ask if the owner would like to come and address us, or the representative of the owner. Ms. Hicks?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council members. I'm happy to answer any questions. Did you have some for me?
Well, more comment. I know it was brought to my attention by two people that live in that subdivision, the Council Bluffs, and of course they have the bigger existing lots. So they are concerned about their property values being diminished because of the smaller lots. And then, of course, going back to Granite Bluffs 1, of course, Granite Bluffs 2 is undeveloped, but there are lots already designated. Lot size, I think most of those average, I think around 15,000 square feet lots or bigger. And so I can see concerns from those property owners and also the property owners in Granite Bluffs, which are a stone's throw away from your development, of feeling that, you know, their property values are going to be impacted by the smaller lots.
Okay. I do not see that. The R1 zoning is complementary to the Canyon Bluff Estates, and Rich was correct in saying those lots to the south, they are larger because of the slope differences. The lots on the north end of that are 6,000 square foot lots. This layout and this development location is very complementary to the Canyon Bluff Estates, and the transportation access to our development aligns with that development to the east. Those lots are similar in size, looking both ways up and down that street. We could have chosen to make those southern lots even larger. The average lots in this layout right here are between 6,000 and 6,800 square feet. Those lots along the west side are a little bit larger to accommodate that transwestern line. Some of the cul-de-sac lots in here are larger, maybe up to 7,800 square feet. But we didn't. We chose to keep that as an open space area to the south instead of trying to create really large lots. I don't see any conflict or differential between the development to the west, Granite Bluffs. That is a block wall. There's no transportation network connecting those at all. So it would be just like butting up to a commercial area, which this does on the north. This complies with the general plan. The R110 zoning that it had, there's a difference of anywhere from 10 to 15 lots in the development scheme if we develop it at R110 to R16. I think it matches perfectly with that development to the east. I don't see disparity, and I am not a real estate person, but in other locations like this, I've never seen a disparity in costs because of a situation like this. But if someone's in real estate, if they have a different opinion, that would be interesting to hear.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I guess one more item. At the P&Z Commission, there were two individuals that spoke, and one woman was concerned about environmental, the vegetation on the site, the animals on the site. I think that was her major concern. The other was a gentleman concerned exactly what Councilman Watkins is talking about with the disparity in lot sizes. He also had concerns with blowing trash and a few other items. He did indicate he was going to follow up with opposition. I checked with Rich today, and there was no further discussion or comment from that gentleman, so I thought we had addressed it appropriately. The transportation issue was addressed with the traffic impact analysis, which I know was already a requirement, but it was reinforced in this. I am definitely in agreement with all the staff recommendations, and I hope you'll be able to approve this.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks. Any other questions, comments? Councilman Oh, okay. Yes, Mr. Ruggles?
I have a,
Councilman
actually
Staley
put
has a
the-
question for you.
I was going to put the city manager on.
Oh,
the
city
spot,
manager.
actually.
Sorry.
As I was sitting here listening to this discussion about this concern, the same concern comes up time and time again when we're looking at these changes, and that is that if we make a change, it will lower the value of the neighboring properties. And what I'm wondering is if there's any hard data to support the idea that if you have a development here, and in this case, there's a wall, so there's a separation, and then you put in a development next to it, and the lots are smaller, will that lower the value of the properties that are in the existing neighborhood?
I would love to be able to answer that. I do not have the data to support what I'm going to tell you, but I will tell you, and I believe planning staff can back me up on this, is that when we talk about good development, we often talk about development that has mixes. And some of the most successful residential development that I've ever been part of or that I've seen throughout my career has been a mix of estate homes, what I'll say is middle-class homes and starter homes, and all the way down to townhomes and or condos that are occurring in the same neighborhood. And in those developments, that you get a nice mix of age diversity, and you get a nice mix of economic or social economic diversity as well. And they usually end up being very nice neighborhoods. And so, although I can't speak to one subdivision bringing down the value of another subdivision, in good, solid planning, city planning, you look for developments that do have mixes that are inside each other or next to each other. As far as property values are concerned, I would be much more concerned about properties that aren't cared for than I would be the size of the lots. And that I do know that condition of lots, homes can bring down the value of their neighbors, but I don't know what data is out there to support a lot size difference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Foggen. There are no more questions. This is a public
I
hearing.
do have one more question. I
Councilman Wade,
apologize.
go right ahead.
When we sat down today, we all received a letter from an individual who argued that perhaps the city did not properly notify the neighboring areas and or post properly the possibility of a rezone. Can you speak to that and tell us what the city did to notify the public in that area?
Certainly, Councilman Waite. As is required under our zoning ordinance, we send out letters to all property owners within 300 feet. We get that list from the Mojave County assessor rolls. We send it first-class mail. We do that, we always do that at least 15 days before the P&Z meeting. And we also posted the site itself with a zoning notice, which we're required to do. We also ran an ad in the Kingman Daily Miner for both the P&Z Commission and a separate ad for tonight's meeting as well. So that's all of our required public noticing that we did for this site.
Is the, you mentioned that there was posted notice on the property. Is it still there?
It was there as of last week. I do know that at one point the sign blew off or it was removed, and I went out and reposted it.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
Sure.
Yes, yes.
Councilman Wade, that sign is still there? Sorry. I was out there today, and across from the mailboxes, there is a sign on Slaughterhouse Canyon Road with a zoning notice on there.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Thank you, Councilman Watkins.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Then we'll open the public hearing, and I do have two people who have signed up to speak, and the first one is George Rips.
Good evening, new council members, old council members, city attorney and the city manager. You want me a latte? It's just a joke.
Could you identify
against-
yourself, please?
Excuse me?
Could you identify yourself?
George Rips, yes, I thought I did. I'm sorry. I'm the property owner to the west of this rezoning request, and I would like the council to deny it. The reason being, and let me start. Originally, in the late 90s, there was several meetings discussing what was called the Wallapai Area Plan, where everything was zoned in that area after these hearings took place 1998, 99, whatever date it was. Then there was, and everything in that area got zoned. Then around the beginning of the new century, maybe 2001, there was an overlay on that dealing with some of the residential and commercial zoning in the Wallapai Road street. Mostly to the, I'm trying to do this, mostly to the south where this subdivision lies. With the help at that time of planning and zoning and the city council, they came up with a strict or guideline as to what the area to the south of Wallapai Mountain Road should look like. Then, as part of that, we personally got and spent a large amount of money buying about 50 acres to just, I think, to the west, and rezoning it so that it complied with not only this discussion of the Wallapai area that took place in the late 90s, but what they had, what the zoning commission and the city council had agreed to in early 2000. I mean, I'm going to have to go a lot further than this, because, I mean, this is a history of 50 acres and 100 lots.
Mr. Cooper?
It's up to the council's discretion if you want to allow more time.
Well, if it's up to the council, that would take a motion to extend time.
Yes, ma'am.
I would entertain a motion to extend time for the history.
I'll make a motion.
I'll
Second
second.
that. Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No.
I'll try to make it as brief as possible. With respect to what I was saying, we have, which was signed in 2004 and recorded in the county, a subdivision that I just need this back. I can't lose this. It's a that shows the subdivision. Of roughly 13 up to an acre worth of the lots are 14,000 and up to an acre. The second thing we had to do when I, as a builder, and was give public reports. It's required for each house that's built in what's called Granite Bluffs at this point. I'm not sure how many homes we built there, but there's probably 40 or 50 homes. As part of that real estate report, we told neighbors what the zoning and the conditions were in that area. And each person that bought a house gets what's called a real estate report. I do agree with Mr. Fogan that a mixed use can be accomplished. But what we're trying to do here, or the city council is having to look at, is you have already created a mixed use in 2004 when I did this, and before that when they discussed the Wallapai area plan. So what you now want to do is, what's proposed is to come back and redo the mixed use plan that's there. The property in question was already zoned R110 because that's what, at the time, the city council, the zoning department, and anybody who came to these meetings had decided they wanted there, or was proper for that area. So you have the people who already bought their homes on one side. You have someone on the other side who have bought their homes with the understanding that what was agreed to or was put before the city council and the zoning department was what they were going to be living with. And now we're coming in and saying, well, I don't know, I can get more lots, so let's just cut down the size, and it doesn't really matter. But to a degree, the city made a commitment to the people who are in Granite Bluffs now, made a commitment to the group that owns that property, how exactly it was going to be, that being this area, be developed. So, that's really, from my standpoint, the crux of the matter. There are minor traffic issues and some other issues there, but you've taken what City Manager Fogan has said, and I could understand, but are now 10 years later saying, well, that's not really what we're going to change it. I mean, it's not like there are not any R16 lots in this town available. I can probably show you 500 of them. And so you as a council and our city has the ability to keep the plan that was originally proposed and voted on the way it was. And I get that's, as far as value goes, there's a lot of different ways to look at the value, but it certainly does probably hinder value of someone who's building a larger house, and I could discuss that off the record, but of the reasons why. But it just doesn't seem fair to the people who have already spent the time and money to do what was agreed to years ago, to change that when there's nothing really changed in the area. There's no more shops, there's Wallapai Mountain Road is still basically Wallapai Mountain Road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rips. Mr. Rick Lambert?
Good evening, Mayor Miles, City Council members. Congratulations on this first night and for your elections. And thank you so much for letting me be heard. Carl, it's good to see you as well. Just a couple of things. I live in the Granite Bluff subdivision, and I think the first thing that I'm curious about is really the sufficiency of whether notice was actually given to our residents in Granite Bluff. I know there was a zoning sign that was on the other side of the proposed subdivision, but I haven't seen anything on our side. And another thing is we've had to go back to the city council, I would say in the last 10 years, probably 5 times. I remember one developer was trying to build apartment houses around there. They were kind of sneaky about giving notice to everyone. I think, Carl, you remember that time. And so we've been back several times. What really gives credence, at least to me, is to see that there's no one that I really see from our neighborhood here, and they have always been here in force. So I would challenge the sufficiency of the notice. It's vague at best. The second thing is all of us in that neighborhood have made substantial investments. In 2007, when my wife and I, when we moved, considered moving in there, I asked the real estate agent, can I see what the plat map or subdivision map looks like surrounding the subdivision that we're in Granite Bluffs, and it was clearly R110. And let me just make sure that you all understand, we do not have a problem with R110 housing going in around us. It's not a problem. We're not anti-development in that way, but for us to be able to make that investment and then 7 to 10 years later, somebody says, by the way, now we're going to change that to an R16 zone, then we're just like, well, I would have never bought this house if I would have known that was going to happen, that they were going to try to rezone that plat map or subdivision map to make them smaller lots. I submit that it does lower our values of our house, and so I really believe that it would be inequitable to rezone after we, and let me just tell you one thing about the families in that subdivision. We have African American families there, we have retirees there, we have young families there, we have working families there. Contained within that subdivision, we have a very mixed and diverse group, and it's a great place to live. And I don't think that the wall that you're talking about is really substantial. I mean, it's going to be, they're going to park those 6-acre lots, or sorry, not 6 acre, but 6,000 square foot lots in there, and it will have an effect on the value of our houses. So I guess what I'm really asking the council is to table this. You know, a planning and zoning small little notice in the newspaper on page 11, is that really notice? I know that we do that in a lot of different situations in the law, but we have neighbors that live here. We were invested in Kingman. We raised our families here. We substantially relied upon the zoning that was originally planned around our subdivision. And if you won't table this matter, then we're asking that you not approve that rezone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. This is a public hearing. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak to this issue? Yes. Please identify yourself.
Yes, Honorable Mayor, council members, my name is Kathy Tackett Hicks again. I'm the owner's agent for this property. I'm a little bit surprised about this. This complies exactly with the general plan, is what the city planned for 15 and 20 years ago. There is no way polished developers of any city come in and assume nothing will ever change. The general plan is a fluid document. Okay? In your city right now, lots of 6,000 to 8,000 square foot lots are being developed on. That's the market right now, and it's good. It's also adjacent right across from another R16 development. I mean, that is great planning. The one gentleman spoke about the public report. That's a disclosure statement. I do public reports. All it is discloses what's around in that area, and it certainly is not a statement of this will never change. It's just a disclosure statement. That comment, it really isn't part of this discussion. The notifications met all the requirements that they have to, absolutely standard. We go through this all of the time. There would not be notifications in the middle of the Granite Bluff development, but all those lots within 300 feet would have been notified by the city. This private property owner has a right to develop. This is within the general plan. The city reviewed this in great depth 15, 20 years ago and said, yes, this is where we want from 3 to 8 or 5 to 8 units per acre, which really allows for a lot less or more density, a lot less size lots. So I mean, I got my ears up. If everything matches with the planning documents and it fits and the infrastructure supports it, I would think you need to take that in consideration.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? Please come forward.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Please identify yourself.
My name is Art Hammond, and I live in Canyon Bluff Estates. I actually have 2 parcels of property. Both of them are over 10,000 square feet, and I do realize that a number of the lots in our subdivision are probably around 6,000, but many of them are larger. In terms of, I just had a few comments. In terms of the notification, I don't know if it was supposed to be a mail notification, but I didn't receive any notification. Just recently, I saw the sign on Slaughterhouse Canyon Road across from the mailboxes that said there was going to be a meeting. And I thought this meeting was a planning and zoning meeting. I didn't realize it was down to the nitty-gritty, deciding whether it's going to be changed or not. I had a question regarding the minimum square footage of the houses that are going to be built there. Is there any information on that? Does anybody know what the minimum square footage of the homes would be? Is there a minimum requirement?
Sir, I don't think we have that information.
Okay. In our subdivision, the minimum is, I believe, 1,400 square feet, and many of them are over 2,000 or what have you. I had a concern about the traffic access into the proposed subdivision. It sounds as if it's coming off of Slaughterhouse Canyon Road. I don't know that with certainty, but I guess that would be a concern of mine. And I just thank you for the opportunity. The main comments were that I didn't receive notification. My wife and I were out walking to the mailbox and saw the sign. Question regarding the square footage of the homes. And yes, again, our subdivision does have a number of 6,000 square foot lots, but many of them are larger. And I would be concerned, I'm not in real estate, but I would be also concerned about the property values in the area. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there an opportunity to speak for a second time?
I would say our general plan is not to allow that. You generally call the public, you have a person come up and state their case. But again, ultimately, the council has the right to allow that. But unfortunately, what happens is, the more that happens,
Right.
the bigger the debate
think-
comes and the longer
I think
the
it,
meeting.
it may be best at this moment to move on and see if there's anyone else that's interested in addressing the council during a public hearing. If not, I'll close the public hearing. I guess I'll ask again, anyone interested that has not spoken? I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed, and at this point, I would like to ask staff a question based on some of the comments. Is there any general rule of thumb, or is there any requirement for minimum housing square footage associated with a residential lot of 6,000 square feet?
In the zoning ordinance itself, there's a minimum square footage of 860 square feet. For tiny homes, it's even smaller, but we don't allow tiny homes in this area. So 860 square feet livable is the minimum. Oftentimes, a developer will create CC&Rs, which the city does not enforce, but they enforce, and will require a larger sized residence. So that could be why there's a 1,400 square foot minimum in Canyon Bluffs 2, for example. And there may be higher minimums in other subdivisions, but that's a CC&R that the city does not enforce.
Thank you.
Sure.
One other question. Since there seems to be so many concerns about the notification, but we are confident that those letters went out because we're hearing that people didn't receive them.
Well, so anyone that's within 300 feet of the site would receive a letter in the mail. And we use the roll from the Mohave County Assessor's Office. So if there's some inaccuracy, that could be what happened. I know in the case of the gentleman who lived in Granite Bluffs 1, that's more than 300 feet away from this site, so he would not have received a letter. I can't speak for the last gentleman who spoke, because I don't know exactly where his lot is in relation to this property.
Thank you, Mr. Ruggles.
Sure.
Madam Mayor, I would have some questions for Rich, if I could.
Yeah.
Do you have a copy of all of the letters that were sent out to the residents in their file at P&Z?
I have a list of the property owners that were sent notices. That's correct.
Okay. And then my next question would be, excuse me, was it Mr. Fripps? Is that correct? Rips, I'm sorry, excuse me. I got it. I'm sorry about that. So, it's always difficult when you have to make a decision on two parties' private property rights, and we have to fall back on, what's on the books, what's going on with the city. How did we get to what this gentleman was talking about, what the Wallapai Valley Area Plan, to where we are now, and what we're making these land decisions on? Can you explain it a little bit?
So I'll do a little history as well. So in approximately 1989, this is before my time here, the Wallapai Mountain Road Area Plan was originally adopted. And at the time, it was a design review district that was 300 feet the other side of Wallapai Mountain Road. It was not a zoning district, it was just a design review district that was established to set architectural design standards for anything that would occur within 300 feet of Wallapai Mountain Road. Later on, that morphed into a zoning district, which is the C2 HMR district, which extends further than that from Wallapai Mountain Road now. It extends as far south as Mission Boulevard. It's both a use district as well as a design district that's applied to the commercially zoned areas. And so in about the time that Mr. Ripp's subdivision was coming online, that was when the 2020 general plan was adopted. And at that time, that's when the number of dwelling units per acre was established for this area, which was 3 to 8 units. I believe it was a little lower previous to that, but in the 2020 plan, they established 3 to 8 units per acre. There was a previous request for rezoning of this property in 2004, which was turned down by the council. Same request, R1 going from R110 to R16. However, at that time, the Canyon Bluffs subdivision to the east was not there, and that whole area was all R110. So this would have been the first property to be rezoned to R16 at that time, and that was turned down by the council. Subsequent to that, the area to the east was rezoned to R16. So now you do have R16 in the area, and it also follows the adopted plan. So there's been a churning of changes, that have occurred over the years as this area has developed, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
Got it. Okay, well, thanks for the overview. That obviously wasn't contained in the report that we got, so it's good to know. And I know with the traffic concerns, the traffic impact analysis, I have some experience with that. When we did the Sunrise Business Park behind the old Safeway, we had to do a traffic impact analysis, and we had to, anything that is a recommendation from a traffic impact analysis is on the developer. So if they say you have to have a new stoplight, that's something they have to pay for. Any of the traffic mitigation measures is on the developer. That's correct, right?
That would be correct.
And then as far as the other concern I'm hearing about is diminished property values, and I'm not sure if that's a question of square footage, as it would be maybe in quality of construction per square foot. I mean, if it's comparable construction quality, I would think that you would hopefully get a comparable price for your land. It's difficult though when you have to juggle or make a decision on competing private property uses. I'm not sure. Thank you for the questions.
Sure.
Any other questions of Mr. Ruggles?
I just have a comment, maybe.
Certainly.
With the possible lack of notification and, some concerned citizens, would it be possible to table it till the next meeting and maybe let the assessor come in and tell us what that does to property values? Would that be possible?
Well, tabling it or postponing it is possible. Mr. Cooper, I would defer to you.
And you can definitely postpone any of the decisions that you wish to make. I mean, you've had your public hearing tonight. If you think you need some additional information, that could be warranted. But I don't know if this is something where you want to dig into having somebody come in and advise you. One, I don't think the assessor's office would come in and advise whether or not this would affect property values, because again, it's not about the lot size for the most part. It's going to be about the construction and what type of upkeep you're going to have on these lots. So I would argue you probably want to stay away from making that kind of a determination personally. So,
Carl, correct me if I'm wrong. This is a zoning only issue, right? And you're not going to know what the quality of construction is going to be until you get into the site planning process.
Correct.
And
in the site planning process, what they've had is just a sample, so that could change. So this is just zoning.
I did want to make a comment, if I may. I just want to echo Council Member Mello Keener's concern. There were several comments made tonight, and also a letter that was given to us concerning the lack of notification. And we did have staff come in and say that notification was properly made. But one comment that staff also made is that there's a possibility that the sign that we're required to post did come down at some point, either blew down or fell down or what have you. But it sounds like in the past when this issue came up, it was the attendance was much higher, which sort of concerns me, because I imagine the attendance would be, if these people had been notified, perhaps we could hear, comments from them as well. And I do want to make sure that everyone has been heard at the very least. So, you know, I would actually, I know this isn't the time to make a motion, but if people were interested, that perhaps we send it back to planning and zoning to allow individuals who did not have an opportunity to speak can comment to them, and then they can and then we can hear it again. That's what I would prefer. I'd feel more comfortable with.
Manager Foggin, did you want to make a comment?
Well,
Because I think we could entertain a motion,
yes, you could.
and I'm
That's
prepared to
one
entertain.
thing. That's
I'm
one thing I would
prepared to
say.
entertain a motion.
The other thing, though, that I would point out is if the council is unhappy with the reporting or notification requirements that are established as part of our planning, then that's probably what you need to address, because there's a lot of development that happens, and if this is the standard way in which we notify people, and we're telling you that that's how it's done, and failure for people to pick up on that is failure to notice, then the policy is failing, not, you know, and how far-reaching do you notify people? That is ultimately the question that I'm going to ask you as the leader of the organization.
And my concern isn't necessarily the type of notice required. It's just that a comment was made that the sign did fall down, coupled with the fact that less people have been notified about this one than in when this has been brought up in the past, which means something happened, or that concerns me. So I don't know if it's an issue with the policies that or the requirements that we have for notification. I think that perhaps something happened, and perhaps, I don't know if it was the sign that fell down or what it might be, but, you know, if there was less attendance on this one, then, you know, if there was sufficient attendance on the previous ones, then clearly notification wouldn't be the issue, or at least the type of notification that we provide. But something different happened on this one, wherein less people came, which implies that perhaps, you know, if that, it might have been affected by, you know, the issue of the sign falling down or blowing down. So.
Thank you, Councilman Waite. I think at this point, I would entertain a motion on this item.
And I would make a motion that we table this item and perhaps send it back to planning and zoning, and yeah, that's what I would.
To planning and zoning for, to re-examine the.
For a rehearing.
To renew the public hearing?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I second.
There is a motion and a second to table this for now and send it back to planning and zoning to hold another public hearing. All in favor? Aye.
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 Those opposed, no. Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you. Ordinance 1881, item B. Amending the City of Kingman Model City Tax Code to reflect a 1% reduction in the transaction privilege and use tax rate and require both voter approval for all future transaction privilege and use tax rate increases. With the passing of Proposition 413 at the November 6, 2018 general election, the City of Kingman's Model City Tax Code must be amended to reduce the transaction privilege and use tax rate and include a voter approval requirement for future transaction privilege and use tax rate increases. Ordinance 1881 reduces the City of Kingman's transaction privilege and use tax rate by 1%, identifies that because of the reduction in these rates, the City of Kingman can no longer fund the 0.5% dedication to fund pavement preservation and the 0.5% dedicated to fund capital improvement projects, and requires that any increase to the City of Kingman's transaction privilege or use tax rate must be approved by the voters. Ordinance 1881 will go into effect January 1, 2019, in accordance with the outcome of the November 6, 2018 general election. Staff recommends council adopt Ordinance 1881, which reduces the City of Kingman's transaction privilege and use tax rate by 1% and requires voter approval for all future increases to the transaction privilege and use tax rate.
Wow, that was a lot of words.
Pardon? So at this point, I would entertain a motion regarding this item.
I have a question, Mayor.
Well, okay, there's,
Just a clarification question.
okay, City Manager Foggin, are you prepared to take a question?
Sure.
Councilwoman Nelson?
I was just curious at this stage, and I know I have it, but I don't have it with me at this moment. The I-11 East Kingman Connection funds, how much is sitting in there right now?
We rolled over about $4.5 million is what I want to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would entertain a motion on this item.
I'll move to pass this.
I second it.
There is a motion and a second to approve Ordinance 1881. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Consideration, C, consideration of canceling the regular council meeting of January 2nd, 2019. In light of the New Year's holiday, staff requests the council consider canceling the January 2nd, 2019 regular council meeting and defer those items to the January 15th, 2019 regular meeting agenda. Staff recommends approval. Is there any comment or questions regarding this? And if not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to cancel the regular meeting of January 2nd, 2019. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Ayes have it, motion carries. Department reports. A, announcement of the January 8th, 2018 budget work session. Manager Foggin.
Yes, just know we've covered this several times, but just as a reminder, yes, we're getting out of the January 2nd meeting just in time to get into a January 8th meeting. And just, again, I know I mentioned what we are going to cover in that meeting, but the highlights will be that we're looking at, we'll be just over halfway through the fiscal year, so an opportunity to just kind of share where we are in the fiscal year. Also, a 5-year forecast on revenue and expenditures. And we'll also be talking, of course, about capital projects and prioritization of the rest of 2019 for capital projects. And we will also talk about possible additional revenue sources that may be something that we need to look at as far as the 2020 budget and moving forward. And then just a short presentation just to remind everybody about what pavement preservation looks like and what our current condition of our roads really, what the scores of those are and what that means. So that's going to be the 2018, January 8th, 2019 meeting will consist of.
Thank you. Could I ask that we have a report, probably from the city clerk's office, about the commission placements, assignments, because it's been sent to us in email tonight, but just kind of informing what that is.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. That's a great question.
So the commission liaison assignments list was emailed to all of you, and we'd like to place that on the next council agenda for finalization for 2019. So if you could have those, your top 3 in preferred order, back to us by the end of the day Monday. We can get that list together, and then any items where we have multiple council members will work through that at that time and be reaching out to you.
Thank you.
Can I make a request? It's budget 2018 budget work session related.
Oh,
Um,
okay, sure.
Is that okay? I just wanted to know if it would be possible or feasible if we could make our last budget available to the public.
Last budget is available to the public on the website under finance.
Okay, under finance.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And the audits, there's the audit report. So all of the reports that Tina works on, that is where they're housed.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Item 9, announcements by mayor, city council members, city managers. I think we will start with Councilwoman Staley.
Yes, I just have a report from the airport commission meeting that we had. And a lot of really exciting things continue to happen out at our airport and industrial park now that it's under the management of the city. And I just wanted to go over a few of those highlights. This is not a complete list, but this is just sort of the big things that we talked about. First, they're still working on a new website for the airport and the industrial park, and it's really going to help with our economic development out there, bringing in new employers and selling existing city land that we have, among other things. So that is in the works and should be finished in the near future. We also discussed the release of 1,400 acres, which is known as Phase 2 of the industrial park. The city of Kingman owns an additional 1,400 acres of land out there that is currently bare. And what we have found is that that process is not as difficult as we might have been told years ago. And we're looking at moving forward with phase, I guess it's like a 10-step process, and we're moving forward with steps 1 and 2 to get those opened up so that we can draw in even more employers to our industrial park. Our terminal received a new roof, and they continue to work on the historic tower and preserving that and actually making it a tourist draw. There are only, we think, 2 or 3 in the entire country that are left, and a lot of people actually do intentionally stop into the airport to see the tower. The draw site continues to move forward, and the next step is to take 141 samples throughout the draw site to see what has been impacted and how deep that goes. And then another piece that is probably the most exciting, especially for the industrial tenants, is that there was an $8.5 million upgrade that happened from Unisource to the substation out there. And so the industry will no longer, or should no longer, be experiencing power outages, which is really important to some of the production that happens. So that all happened because we had management of the airport. When we took it over, we noticed that there was a problem, and we were lucky to have a past Unisource employee that was working for us part-time, and he helped get this upgrade. So in addition to the $20 million, the grant money that we received to fix and repair, we also have this $8.5 million Unisource upgrade. So those are some really exciting highlights.
Thank you very much. Councilman Waite.
I don't have any announcements at this time. Thank you.
None for me.
None for you, okay.
Nope, not today.
Okay. Councilman Lingenfeld.
I attended the Economic Development Advisory Commission meeting this last week. I'm pleased to report to the public and the council that the draft comprehensive economic development strategy is with staff and with the commission members. They're going through that draft right now. They'll be having their comments back directly to Mr. Foggen's economic development manager within, I think, a month is what it sounds about right. There's going to be 3 action strategies underneath that comprehensive economic development strategy. There's going to be one for the population serving market for the traded sector, and then one for the visitor sector. They're going to be time framed. There's going to be people that are actually named and in charge of moving things forward. And I believe that's going to be presented to the council in January. And we will have our, really full comprehensive economic development strategy in the last decade, right? To start moving forward with as best we can. The website work, economic development is working on that, as Jamie mentioned, and I've heard a target release date in March. And hopefully, Kingman will then have the most data-rich, comprehensive economic development website in the northwest portion of Arizona, so that's encouraging. On Thursday, I'll be going to the MOHAVE Community College Kingman Campus Advisory Committee meeting, along with Mr. Foggin and Jen to represent the city, in the area of workforce, which is definitely important to economic development. So,
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Watkins?
Nothing, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Manager Foggin, I think I skipped you. Did you have any other announcements?
I just have one announcement, and that is that something you're going to be seeing coming from the clerk's office here shortly is a request for a special meeting on the 18th of December at 4 o'clock. We are going to bring in our land use attorney from Phoenix, Andrew McQuire, and we are going to get our first look, as a group, at the Kingman Crossing Development Agreement. So that will be 4 o'clock. I think that will give us enough time before the work session starts at 5:30 to have a good conversation about what that's looking like. So,
Thank you.
Yep.
I think that is a good plan. And as far as myself, I would like to, first of all, thank the city, especially the Parks, Department, for the Parade of Lights participation. It was a wonderful event, and also for all the work that's been done to do all the lights in Locomotive Park. It was remarkable. I mean, it's truly a light fantastic scene. So I really appreciate that on behalf of all of us, and it was a pleasure to participate. And I have to say, I was thankful to be in Santa Claus's carriage because I didn't have to take the brunt of the wind. Thank you. And the other thing is, tomorrow morning, the Arizona Commerce Authority Film Commission will be here, and we'll be filming a promo for Kingman, and I'm proud to be able to participate in that. And I want to thank Mr. Kellogg and his department for providing information that will help me give better statistics and information about our city. So that's all I have, and so I would move to the last item, which are any council requests for future work session agenda items or calendar adjustments.
I would have one, Mr. Foggin. We had a number of months ago, we had a presentation on the PSPRS, Public Safety Personnel Retirement System, and the pension liability that the city has. And I know that the 0.5% TPT that was set to sunset, we would remove the sunset. That was estimated to generate 3.1, but our annual pension liability under that is 3.2. So I know that presentation had a number of recommendations for us to pursue. And I don't care how you handle it. If it's another work session or maybe it's included in the discussion on the 8th, but it's something that we need to look at now more than ever.
okay.
Thank you. Any other items? Councilman Waite.
Thank you. I do have a request, and there are a myriad of reasons why I would make this proposition, not the least of which is financial. But if the council is amenable, I'd like to change the venue of these meetings back to the council chambers, if that pleases the council, or if the council is interested in that. If this is the proper forum to make that request.
Is that appropriate for the 8th or for another special session?
Not the 8th.
Or not the 8th. Well,
The 8th.
when would that be appropriate, that discussion?
We can set that for a work session discussion that definitely needs to take place before any decision making is made on that. So
Exactly.
I've heard that, so we will add it to a work session it doesn't, it probably won't take us very long to have that discussion because it has been looked at. So we will add it to a work session and have an answer for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
We have a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes carry it. Motion.